What is up, RotoGrinders? Dean here. That's Dean 7904. If you want to get all technical, it is not 9:30. It's 9:36. If you want to get all technical on me, but it is, the start. We're taking you all straight up the lock. We've survived week 1, week 2. Let's knock it out. Joining us today, it is the People's Show. Bobby Gomes. We'll talk to him in a second, but I do want to bring in Kyle Murray. Kyle is going to be jumping in for Tasteful Tides. Tim up there in Maine, dealing with some weather-related issues last night with the hurricane. Hopefully, we talked to him last night. It feels like he survived. He's going to be all right. And hopefully everybody else in the area did okay as well. Kyle stepping in. Do appreciate. Kyle, you've won yourself many tournaments. You're a part of the projection team. Welcome to the show. Good morning. And thanks for hopping on to the People's Show.
Yeah, I'm pumped to be here. Hopefully Tim is doing okay with the weather, but I'm glad to take a spot for the day and fill in. Hopefully I can fill the shoes. But I'm pumped to talk some football with you guys.
Former $1 million winner, Bobby Gomes. Bobby, a little flustered there with some tech issues pre-show. I wasn't naming names in the chat. I was like, hey, they were blaming me. It's like, oh, why are you guys late? It's got to be Dean sleeping in, which is that was the chalk for sure. It's egregious at 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday. Come on, let me sleep a little bit. But we got football. We got football to knock out. Bobby, welcome. We excited about week 2. Congratulations on week 1. I know you had a big week 1. Let's keep that momentum going.
Yeah, let's keep it going. A little technical difficulties prior to the show, but we're here. We're ready to rock, talk some week 2. Happy to be with you guys. Happy to be able to get on because I don't know what just happened prior to the show. I stepped on a wire and then my whole computer just shut down completely. So that was not fun. So ready
Did
to
you restart the router? I'm told that's the key to get
I think I stepped on the router. So everything just collapsed.
I got nothing for that. That's just I don't know. I don't know what the option is when you step on the router. Hey, Bobby, I'm not sure if you're prepared. Like, think of one as I throw it to Kyle first. But we want to tease a hot take. Tease a hot take for the show. We're here until 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock on the East Coast. You get yourself Erik Beimfohr and SquirrelPatrol, who I hope you're sitting down. He won himself several live final seats last week because he always does. Dude's an absolute machine. Taking y'all all the way up the lock as well, answering your questions on Crunch Time. Kyle, give the people a tease. I know you have some bets as well. You wrote some up for scores and odds and, some player props. Maybe you can sprinkle them in throughout the show. But you were talking about one of your hot takes. And just you can just tease it if you want, however you want to deliver it. But, got to keep the people wanting more.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna test your hosting skills. I know I gave you a little bit of a tease to it before the show, but I'm gonna throw a curveball. I'm gonna change my pickup and obviously a little bit of teaser here. I have a running back, looking sub 10% that was one of the highly drafted running backs in season long, and I think he's got a great matchup, but he's just getting overlooked. So one of these guys who I think has the chance to be the highest scoring player on the board, and he's a little bit more expensive, but I think he's gonna be extremely low on to go under the radar. So he's a guy that I like a lot today.
Ooh, so what you're telling me is it's probably somebody who, you know what it is? I know who it is. I already know. I got the answer. Do you trust that I know who it is? I know what state you live in. I know what state you live in. Is that a clue or no? Am I wrong?
It is not.
Oh, I thought I had it. I thought it was going to be Gibbs. Like Gibbs is going to get a little bit more this week. Yeah. Okay. It's not I don't mind Gibbs, but it's okay. It's going to be another rookie that probably didn't get enough to eat. Is that possible?
Nope, not a rookie.
No, nope. Not Bijan?
Not Bijan.
All right.
I think it's Bijan.
but so I think he's just switching the players on me, just kind of messing with me. He's like, it's not him. Now I'll think of somebody new. Bobby, who is he teasing? Who is he talking about? Because I thought Bijan and Gibbs are both pretty good picks. 2 guys that were picked pretty high. Damian Pierce, 4th round, 5th round. I don't know if that's high or not.
He is awfully close in price to Bijan. Awfully close.
Okay.
Derrick Henry.
A little bit more expensive than Henry. It's Barkley. Yeah.
How did week one go for the? What is that?
15 guesses it took us to get that.
Yeah, we're pros, man, experts for sure. Obviously. Hey, before we talk about week 2, did you have any, Kyle, any sort of priors that you felt worked? I don't want to say confirmed. It's only 1 week to sample, but priors you feel really, really good about, and maybe like the biggest surprise of week 1. It's like, oh wow, I did not anticipate that, and maybe that's going to continue going forward. Maybe it's not. Is there something you can point to? It's like, yeah, I got that right, or maybe I'm wrong about this, and I got to change my mind quick.
Well, I mean, the first again, I don't want to overreact to week one. Obviously, the first thing that really sucked last week was the Bengals offense, but I was extremely high on them. I still think that they'll end up being the best pass offense in the NFL by the end of the year. So I definitely do not want to overreact to that. And obviously, we'll touch on those guys later on. But that was definitely one thing that was not right. And then, I guess just sticking with guys on the slate, like two guys on the slate that, really qualify as a highly projected target share type guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Calvin Ridley, not really anything surprising there, but it was good to see Ridley come out and be the alpha that some people were, I guess, sort of questioning. So that was one thing that definitely went right.
Yeah, we're going to talk about cash game builds in a second, just kind of work out and just kind of have that conversation. And Ridley is a cash game staple today, it seems like, which is, life comes at you fast, obviously in a fabulous game there against Kansas City as well. Bobby, do you happen to have anything from week one that, you felt like confirmed your priors? It wasn't necessarily, or something with the other way. It's like, wow, I expected this and that happened. And maybe it's going to continue going forward. Maybe it's not something you're kind of monitoring.
Yeah, for me, just attacking condensed usage in high-paced games, I think that kind of is something I've been trying to do more in NFL. And it worked last week, like to the extreme, right, with Tyreek. That's obviously an outlier. So we'll see going forward if that's able to, if it's something that's more sticky. But I do have a play. I'll give it out later on as we get to that game. But yeah, I think it'll be a pretty interesting one.
All right. If we can have producer Steve throw that up on the screen as far as, one of our cash game builds. And I was talking about this with Kyle pre-show, and it feels like the cash game build, Kyle, and you speak to it for yourself by all means, but it's pretty loose, right? Like if you want to play Josh Allen. He's spectacular, sure. Anthony Richardson opens up some salary. They're playing super fast in game one in a dome at Houston. Jones, I see, is popping a little bit against Arizona. Looks like a good bounce back spot. Lawrence, for sure. I'm not married to anybody as far as quarterback. It's like, one of four guys, but maybe five guys. But quarterback-wise, did you feel like that's where we have to go, or it's all just sort of fluid and like one decision leads to the other, and it's just like there's a pool of guys. It's like, you're just kind of like doing 2v2s and 3v3s to get to your final cash lineup.
No, yeah, I think it is pretty wide open, and a lot of that does start with the quarterback position. There's enough cheap guys who are potentially taking steps up, like you see on the screen now with Kelly and Dillon due to injury, or there's just a couple of cheap guys in general, and that opens up the ability to use a guy like Josh Allen in cash games. But also there's 2, 3, 4 guys who are $6K or cheaper. That makes sense for value options as well. So I think the quarterback position is kind of where it all starts for cash games. Obviously, if you do start Josh Allen, you are sort of forced into going down a little bit more other positions, but there are a couple of those cheaper options as well. And I like Allen a lot today. I do think he is the cash game where you should be starting cash games, but there can definitely be cases made for some of these other quarterbacks down the board, and with them being a little bit cheaper, kind of opens up everything else kind of across the board.
We're looking at DK. I would just add on FanDuel, you're getting a really nice discount on Lamar Jackson. He was pretty bad week one. All the touchdowns are rushing, but like the discount is good enough where I think you can start there. If you need some salary, I'm okay playing Lamar in cash on FanDuel. Wouldn't do it on DK, I don't think. Bobby, if you have any thoughts, by all means, as far as quarterback, and we should mention, I guess, at the top, the injuries, if the people are not aware, we're not expecting to see Aaron Jones. Christian Watson, also the receiver there for Green Bay. It's why some Packers are popping, despite the fact they're in not the most appealing game environment. CEH unlikely to go. Brandon Cooks unlikely to go. Austin Eckler is a big one, unlikely to go. And that's why you're seeing some Josh Kelly. Not the greatest matchup in the world, which I think makes for an interesting tournament conversation, but you pretty much, I don't want to say you have to play Kelly in cash, but you're supposed to. You're supposed to. Like, if Carney was on here, he'd say you're stupid if you don't do it. I'm not that direct, but you're supposed to play Kelly in cash. And it's a conversation for tournaments. But yeah, Bobby, what's your thoughts here as far as this shell? And then kind of like what you do with it, because you're in those GPP streets, and a lot of people like to play their cash game in tournaments, or just kind of like they tinker with it a little bit. And these players are going to be elevated as far as ownership. So yeah, your thoughts as far as this shell? Do you like it? Is there a 2v2 you prefer more? What do you have here?
I like the shell. I think what you hit on that's kind of important is there's no real cash play this week that you're very comfortable with. I think the construction starts at the running back position. So you talk about Kelly, you talk about Dillon, and it's not anything that I really feel like playing in tournaments and cash, yeah, I'm going to go there. But you have guys like Rachaad White that you could consider in that situation, who I also don't think is like the greatest play at 5.5, but he's fine for cash. In tournaments, I'm trying to get away from these guys. But the show itself, like you're going in with Kelly, you're going in with Dylan. Ridley, we've seen the usage that he got. Musgrave is like their number one option in Green Bay for the Packers this week, right? So, yeah, at the tight end position, I think you're paying down there. I think he makes sense. Allen, the quarterback position, Allen, Richardson, Trevor Lawrence. If you showed up with any of those guys, like I'd have no issue with it.
Yeah.
I think they're all in play. I think Allen's the best. So I would just play Allen, but like if people went to those other guys, I wouldn't, and it got them something that they liked, I wouldn't have an issue with it.
By the way, we talked about bold calls earlier. Speaking of bold calls, if your bold call is correct and you happen to answer my tweet, I'll go ahead and drop it in chat. You're going to win yourself, if it's most correct, most accurate versus everybody else, 2 weeks free of RotoGrinders Premium. You're going to see a lot of the premium tools in action throughout this show, all the way up to lock. I'm going to drop this in chat for the people. And even we have some submissions later on in the show. We're going to critique. We're going to critique some of the bold calls. We'll bring them up. So, we'll see if we like them. Maybe we'll grade them on a scale of 1 to 5 or something like that. Want to make this show as interactive as possible, Bobby, because it is, as Bobby deemed it, it's the People's Show, right? So
the People's Show. We need to get some likes for the People's Show. Can we get the likes up here? We're at 30 likes. Let's get some likes going.
It's an egregious number. Do you want to continue?
An egregious number. 191 approaching 200. We had 600 watching last week. We can easily get these likes up. So
people are still waking up. People are still waking up. You don't really think about hitting buttons until it's at least like 10 a.m. or something like that. I saw shout out to Mr. Richard in chat. Well, he says he's up before 6:30 in the morning. I saw somebody in chat said they're on the West Coast. Shout out to the people on the West Coast out there watching us. I guess it's 6:48 now. But yeah, we want to make the show as interactive as possible. I see our boy Erik in chat asking about Ritter. I mean, is he going to throw the football today? It's kind of the problem. If they had their druthers in Atlanta, they would just run it like 70 times. I'm not getting. I don't. What's the scenario where we're considering a guy like Ritter? Certainly not for cash. Is it Kyle? I mean, I don't know how many labs you're making today, but I'm guessing Ritter is not on any of them. Feel free to tell me otherwise.
Yeah, the scenario where you play Ritter is probably a different year when he's on a different team and throwing the ball more. Yeah, Ritter would be a pass for me today. There's other guys that if you wanted to really take a dive down there, you could, but Ritter wouldn't be the guy for me.
Yeah. Do you want to throw this out there? You're talking tournaments, you're talking cash. I assume you're talking tournaments. Like we could unleash them. Who are some of your favorite quarterback reaches, I suppose, in tournaments? Could one of them be Brock Purdy? Because I see the chat's talking him up there, and he might actually be good, just no pedigree. And like that's why he's got to prove himself every single week. And he's got some cheap, for some reason, Ayuk and Samuel Debo, they're both really, really cheap, it seems like, in the mid fives. Is that one of the options? I don't want to answer the question for you, but by all means. Yeah,
Brock is probably the cheapest quarterback that I'm like comfortable playing. There are a couple of guys that project okay. You have a couple of cheap guys like Baker's down there at 5.1, Tannehill down there at 5K. Those guys are guys you could, I guess, talk yourself into. I personally wouldn't be doing that, but I prefer those two guys over Ritter. But yeah, Purdy's probably the cheapest that I have interest in. I think he's fine. Geno's at 5.9. I know we're going to talk about them a little bit with the injuries that they're facing on the offensive line, but this is an offense that was, one of the better fantasy producing offenses in football. They add a couple of pieces on the outside, and in terms of now everyone's looking away from them because of some injuries in the offensive line, which I know can be key, but they're going to be very low owned. So that Seattle team I do have some interest in today as well, especially in a game that could shoot out. We saw them score 93 points in that matchup. Not expecting that again, but I know Detroit's defense improved a little bit in the offseason, but yeah, these are two teams that are definitely still capable of getting into a shootout. So that's another spot that I like.
Yeah, Detroit's defense improved and Seattle's offensive line's a little bit shaky. That's my one concern for that game, but certainly that there's a recipe for that game to shoot out. Not to that extent. That's we can't expect 90 points again.
Yeah.
Bobby, you got a cheap quarterback you like? We're gonna go to another cash game build in a second, but since we're on that conversation, by all means, the cheapest quarterback you're willing to play today is who?
Probably Anthony Richardson. I'm really not going lower than that. I will say this: if
Yeah.
Mills, is Stroud out? Like, what's the situation with Stroud?
He's expected in. I know you're trying to make
expected
Mills
in?
happen.
I
he's
was
expected
trying to
play.
make Mills happen. Like, that game's paced up. There's Dell, there's Nico Collins, there's Dalton Schultz there. So yeah, I was trying to make Mills happen in tournaments, or just build him into my script. If he hits, he hits. But he would have been the lowest I would have gone if Stroud was out.
Shout out to producer Rob in chat pointing out that it's Mahomes' birthday. Yeah, I did see that tweet. The last time he played in his birthday, he was at Texas Tech and threw for like 600 yards or something egregious. And like what? He's going to be good in his birthday probably. He can't pass it and throw it though. Hopefully his pass catchers will do him a few more favors today. He does get Travis Kelce back today, which makes him a little bit more appealing as well. They're asking about the cash game defense. We didn't want to fill out the entire thing, and it's like the rest of the build. It's pretty fluid. Bobby, I know you have your defensive segment on your podcast. I don't know. I mean, you locked in for a defense. This is another one of the things where if I had all the money in the world, I think I want Dallas. Okay. But I don't, so I won't. 4-5 on FanDuel, you probably play Dallas on FanDuel, but on DK, you're really pinching pennies in some spots, and I don't think I'm getting there. Yeah, your official defense take?
Yeah, official defense take. I like Detroit. We have Detroit in our optimal currently, so yeah, I don't mind the lines at 3K. I could see you playing Arizona as well at 2.6. I think a nice defensive pivot in tournaments is the Jets. I don't think the Jets are going to get much ownership going up against Dak. Also, on the other side of this, if you're not playing Allen, I think you play the Raiders D at 2-2 because Allen's going to make his mistakes, right? Issue with the Raiders D is they have Chandler Jones missing, and I think it's a rookie that didn't play too well the first game, so their line is in question. They usually have an all right pass rush. It's really the secondary that where they'll have trouble. So I think that'll lean in a Dean's play of the day when we get to it, because I think I know it.
Yeah, I was talking about it last night, and I'm still I'm not backpedaling on it, but I'm definitely going to play it. I mean, like the floor is kind of rough.
Seems like a backpedal.
No.
That seemed like that was pretty much a backpedal, Dean.
Let me ask this. I like Detroit defense, and it's funny because that's one of the games, and we're going to go game by game about some of the more important games. We're not going to talk about every single game. We're going to do that shortly as well. But Detroit's 3K, Bobby, and Tampa's 3-2. If money wasn't a thing, if you had the $200, would you prefer Tampa over Detroit? So I think I do. I like both.
Yeah, I think I would prefer Tampa over Detroit, but they're both going to be in my pool. It's going to be Tampa, Detroit, the Jets, the Raiders, and likely Arizona. They'll be the 5 defenses that I consider playing.
I pulled up our expert rankings that myself and Keith and Noto and Squirrel and yourself, Bobby, Head Chopper, a whole bunch of us do football rankings, and I think I ranked the Jets the highest on DK. I put them dollar for dollar, because I think those are the 2 best defensive teams in football, and I think Dallas probably has a pretty good offense. But you don't really care about how many points they score, but that game I think is the lowest total on the board. Yeah, it's just the Jets get so much pressure, and the Hard Knocks effect. I watched Hard Knocks, and now I think the Jets are just going to pitch shutouts every single week. And of course, they came out looking really good Monday night. Allen made some bad errors as well. You have thoughts there, Kyle, as far as cash defense? Obviously, that's not the last thing you're thinking of. Sometimes you'll get down to as cheap as possible just to make everything else work, the high variance of defense. But do you have a hot take when it comes to D, or it's just like whatever fits and you'll move on?
Yeah, honestly, it's just whatever fits. I really don't think about defense a whole lot. A lot of variance there. And in terms of tournaments, I really just try to avoid a lot of the chalk. Right now we have Cardinals as the most popular defense, so they're probably the cash game defense that I think makes sense if you're looking for that. But if you're not playing cash games, you can really do whatever you want. You can play the Raiders defense against the Buffalo, save all the money, go down to 2,200. I know we saw Buffalo put up I know they can put up a lot of points. I know that they have the highest implied team total, but Josh Allen turned the ball over 4 times last week, and we know he's capable of doing that. And the Raiders have some guys in the pass rush that they can, potentially have put up some points. But yeah, for me, it's mainly, unless I have a little bit of salary to work with, it's mainly just throwing whatever fits in there and trying to make the most sense of it, and not using defenses against guys in lineup and the basic stuff there.
Hey, Steve, let's throw up that second cash lineup I sent you. And to be clear, this is not my cash lineup. It's just sort of like a build you can get, just kind of running optimals and stuff. But myself and Bobby were talking about a pre-show. I'm curious your thoughts as well, Kyle. We're going to have it pulled up there in a second. But when it jumps up there, you're going to see 3 Packers. And it makes sense to some degree. Like their number 1 receiver is out. The number 1 running back is out. But it's also, it's also the Packers. And it's like it's not the greatest environment in the world. I almost kind of wanted to show this just because it's something I don't want to do, but it's possible an optimizer can give you this, right? They can give you 3 Packers against Atlanta with a team total right around 20 or so. The absence of Jones, all of a sudden Dillon's the RB1. And like Musgrave looks like their top receiver. Reed's going to step up as well. I don't think Dobbs had the touchdowns last week, but Reed actually looked better if you kind of dig in as far as opportunities, and he's still pretty cheap. He's cheaper than Dobbs. But I think it's just more like a lesson, right? You wouldn't play 3 Packers in cash in this scenario. Like if you team total 30 or something like that, you're in a dome and you're going to fly back and forth. Sure, but that's not what we're looking at here as far as the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I really don't even feel that great about AJ Dillon. And I get that he's a cash game play today, and I know all the reasons why. But in terms of just the overall feeling that I get when playing AJ Dillon today, it's not great. But I understand the cash game play side of it. So I think from that standpoint, definitely not loving playing 3 Packers. I get the Reed play. I probably don't try to do that in spots like this in cash games, just because I don't know how exciting this game is going to be, how much production the Packers are going to have. But to your point, Reed, he played a good amount. He had 18% of the targets, and he was actually banged up for a while. He left the game for a pretty significant amount of time. I think he was just cramping, but that's still time off the field that he potentially missed out on some volume and some targets. So I think the Reed call makes sense. Musgrave is definitely my preferred Packer today, so I think he makes a lot of sense for cash games. I think he's pretty clearly, I think there's a couple pivots, but in terms of cash games, I think he's probably pretty clearly the most optimal guy today.
Yeah, I'm looking at Kincaid as a possible pivot. I heard Noto talking about that on the podcast there with Bobby, and that kind of like also leads to a pretty nice cash game build with Kincaid. And Oakland really, really concise. Jacobs is like a legit throwback running back, and the absence of Myers should lead to Adams getting even more, assuming these teams, can stick with each other, or assuming the Raiders can stick with Buffalo. Bobby, or either one of you guys, actually. So receivers, if there's a lot of good receiving options, right? Ridley, Diggs, Adams. On Wednesday night I was doing the Pick Six show with Rebar and Daigle, and we were like, yeah, I'm on Ross St. Brown. That's going to be your cash game receiver. Like things change, but like maybe not. Why would you not want Amon Ra versus Seattle? You should rip these guys up. And Keenan Allen, the absence of Eckler looks spectacular versus Tennessee. I'm sure you've heard they're a pass funnel, right? But they're not the guys that are necessarily popping. Chase looks good. Do you have any clear separation amongst all these elite receivers? Either one of you guys, like as far as Ridley, Diggs, Adams, Amon Ra, Chase, Allen. To me, they're all like different degrees of good, and I'm having a hard time figuring out who my favorites are. Whoever wants to go, if you see like a favorite amongst those.
What's the context? Cash or tournaments?
Yeah, it's hard for cash. Tournaments, they're also like similar as far as ownership, at least what I'm seeing right now. So I'm just curious what kind of stands you're taking. If you are taking any stands, that it's just I don't know how to separate, one of those from the others, basically. Outside of like, well, I'm going to make a Cincinnati stack, so this one's going to have Chase in it, right?
Yeah.
But how are you handling that?
I like Ridley and Adams for cash. I think you can make a case to get Diggs or Chase in there also, but if I had to if it was definitive and gun to my head, it's Ridley and Adams for me.
Kirkwood in chat, by the way, just says, look at these nincompoops. I tweeted out the word nincompoop the other day because it's an underrated word. You know how Justin Timberlake, he brought sexy back? I want to bring back nincompoop. I feel like it's been gone too long. But there you go. We're going to make it a thing.
It's going to be tough to bring back, I would imagine.
Well, if you would retweet when I say nincompoop, you could help, Bobby. You could be part of the cause.
I didn't see it.
Well,
you're a nincompoop, Dean. Let's get the show on the road. Come on.
I was calling out the Angels for being nincompoops.
Hit the like button if you think Dean's a nincompoop. 100 likes in the next 5 minutes. Easy.
Yeah. Well, also we have Kyle's got some like scores and odds plays for the people. Is it sides, totals? Is it player props? You got everything for him?
Right. So yeah, right now I just have props in there. So all props today for me.
All right. How have you noticed the lines moving? As like, obviously you're getting better lines probably Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They get sharpened up. Are they really are they still like are they stale lines, or there's something we can use? You got stuff we can use today.
So if, a few of them I put in last night, so I assume that they're still pretty good. But last week we were doing all the props for the prop model as well, and we had some. We had a lot of line movement actually. I think we went like 6-2 last week, and the two that lost were actually lines that closed like way above. Where like we had Alexander Madison at like 54.5. He closed at like 61.5, and he obviously did not get there. So yeah, so far so good with the line movement working in our favor. But I'm pretty sure that the most of the picks for me will have pretty relevant lines. But I guess one ties into these wide receiver discussions. Like I feel pretty good about saying that in these smaller field tournaments, like single entry stuff, 3 max stuff, one of these receivers is going to get left out. I don't see all of these guys being in that 18 to 23% projected ownership range. So like in smaller field single entry stuff, I think Jamar Chase will probably be the guy that is forgotten. And he's a guy that I like a lot in these kinds of contests. Obviously, the Bengals looked atrocious last week, but I took the over on Jamar Chase, 79.5 receiving yards. Took the over on Joe Burrow, 263.5 passing yards as well. Burrow in his last 4 games averaging 343 passing yards against Baltimore. Now, 2 of those games were over 420 passing yards, and he had 1 game up in the 500, so that's going to help that average. But regardless, they've had success in this matchup, and that they're looking to bounce back in a big way. So Jamar Chase is probably my favorite of these guys in tournaments. But I think Diggs and Ridley would be my 2 favorites in sort of an optimal or cash game setting. But I do feel pretty good about Jamar Chase potentially falling down in terms of ownership come smaller entry field, single entry type contests.
Yeah, it's just, and I totally get it, but it's just so wild to me that like Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra are not like these cash game staples. But I understand why it's happening, but it's just weird to me because they both look like so solid today. Amongst that group, Kyle, Ridley, Diggs, Adams, Amon-Ra, Chase, Allen, you've already kind of said one way, but is there one that you're going to be probably lower in the field on? Like not necessarily because you want to, but just the way, how that works. Just you can't have everybody. You can't be over on everything, obviously.
Yeah, I think in tournaments, it's probably going to be Keenan Allen. And it's a bummer because I think he's a really good play. But, if you wanted to get exposure to that offense, you have Mike Williams down there, $1,400 cheaper on DraftKings, probably going to be lower owned as well. And obviously he missed some of the game last week after I think he got hit in the head, but he came back in, wasn't on injury report or anything throughout the week. So I think he's good to go. So I think that's kind of a natural way to be under on Keenan. And then in terms of tournaments, I think Devontae Adams is probably going to be a guy that I'm low on, and I'm terrified of that. He could easily have like a 45% target share today, and I really wouldn't bat an eye. But I think Jamar Chase has a massive ceiling. I think Diggs has a monster ceiling today. Love Amon-Ra. And then Ridley, I think, is just – I still think he's too cheap. I think he's an 8K receiver if he's going to continue this kind of role, and especially in what should be the best passing environment from a game script perspective, being 3-point underdogs against Kansas City, 51-point game total. So I think Keenan and Adams are probably going to be the 2 guys that reluctantly I'll be a little bit under the field on.
You said you like Diggs. Do you feel obligated to run it back or not necessarily? You're going to run it back with Jacobs. I don't think you're thrilled running it back a Hunter Renfrow, but he's probably going to get more opportunity theoretically with the absence of Myers. But he's cheap, right? He's nonsense, but he can get 4 for 50 and maybe fall in the box, something like that. But if you're not going to have a ton of Adams, like are you going to play Diggs just by himself and that's that?
I think you can do that. I think that's totally fine. But I do like Jacobs quite a bit today. And again, like I don't like to look at week 1 and take all that we saw as the gospel or whatever. But in terms of what we did see, the Bills really struggled against the run, and I think a lot of that is due to their scheme. They played almost 100% of their snaps in the nickel, so I think that's going to allow them to be ran all over at times, and I think that sets up well for Jacobs. I know the game script might not seem all that great being 8-point underdogs, but I still think the Raiders are going to want to run the ball, and I think Jacobs is going to be involved in the passing game regardless. So I think he's a really sharp play today.
All right, let's hit on a couple of the key games on the slates. Kansas City at Jacksonville. 51.5 is the total. Kansas City 3.5-point favorite here at Jacksonville, Bobby. Mahomes versus Lawrence, two of the best quarterbacks in the league, two of the more fun offenses. We're expecting CEH not to go. KC getting Kelsey back. Mahomes is a quarterback that's not going to get played today. I shouldn't say not going to get played, but like he's going to be behind the guys that we've talked about already. He's going to be behind, I think, Allen, Richardson, and Lawrence at least, possibly more. Where do you want to start this game as far as attacking? Assuming you're interested in this game, I'm guessing you have some interest in KC Jacksonville.
Yeah, so I'm pushing the chips in on Kelsey in this late just because this is the highest paced game, right? And everything's kind of correlated through Kelsey in this game. So you can basically run some Jacksonville guys on one side. You can run Mahomes at low ownership on the other. Mahomes on his birthday at low ownership. That means something, Dean, his birthday today, just so you know. But anyways, yeah, I really like just playing these Chiefs guys, getting over on Tony. The market is obviously really low on Tony. Tony's a talent. Like we've seen Tony play great last year. I think I'm definitely going to have some Tony. He's also in that 5K range, which I think just from a salary standpoint is a pretty interesting spot in the slate. Like in terms of construction, like if you're flipping the build and getting away from these chalk running backs, there are going to be a lot of chalk receivers, non-chalk receivers in the 5K range that you can use as pivots, like as salary pivots off of like a Kelsey, a Dillon, or Rashad White. So those running backs that I don't want to play in tournaments, I think I'll still have some Kelly, but the other two I'm having issues with currently. I think I'm full fading Dillon and full fading Rashad White. But yeah, so I like the Mahomes side. I like the Lawrence side. Ridley was someone I was going to come in lower on just because I was buying into that Kirk narrative that this was going to be his week and not the Ridley week. But Dean talked sense to me last night, and I'm going to play some Ridley and definitely be over the field on Ridley. You just take the easy points, man. Like I'm still going to have Kirk and stuff if he hits my Lawrence teams as a secondary or some of these Kelsey. If he's like a run back with Kelsey, I think that'll be fine. Zay Jones did work in a little bit more than I think the market expected, but Zay Jones is actually pretty good, right? Like he's not terrible. I think that we all thought he was pretty awful. But when you've seen that highlight video of him next to Ridley over the summer, like them running routes next to each other, he looked good. So I think it's a lot closer within that infrastructure of the team than we actually realize. So I don't mind Zay Jones. I think Evan Ingram gets in the box today. I think double tight ends are very much in play. ETN's the one I have issue with because I think a lot of people are going to rush back to ETN. But now Chris Jones is back. I don't know how much he does for the run. I think he does more for the pass rush. But is the receiving role for ETN sticky? I don't want to overreact on the 4 catches he got last week when previously we haven't seen him outside of in college when he was used in the passing game utilized that way in the NFL. So that's where I'm having question marks is like my ETN at 6'9". Am I playing him? Because I played him last week. I think he's going to be a little bit more chalkier today, and I think I may end up getting away from him.
He feels like a little bit of leverage away from Ridley, unless you're playing him in the same lineup. You can do that too. But yeah, I think that's an interesting. Like Ridley's going to be in the 20s as far as ownership. ETN, we're looking at 9% or so. And certainly you'll play them both again. By the way, shout out to Kirkwood in the chat. Bobby, I know you're a best ball influencer now, but people in chat are asking Kirkwood Rainmakers 1v1s, which is spectacular. I didn't know it was Kirkwood.
That's unbelievable. Kirky's a big Rainmakers guy. If you have Rainmakers questions, ask Kirk like 10 minutes before log, and he'll get you set up straight away.
Just slide into his DMs. I don't want to derail the show, but didn't Squirrel get involved in having a bunch of Rainmakers?
Squirrel was tilting hard on Twitter the other day.
I don't know.
I don't know exactly what's happening. You know, I'm just a best ball influencer, so I didn't know what he was talking about, but it was definitely over my head.
He won a bunch of Rainmakers packs or cards or whatever they're called,
money or something,
and he won and still lost. I think somehow. I don't know. It's not. Kyle, you a big Rainmakers guy? You understand what's going on there, or is that something you've not dabbled in?
Kyle, you're muted, buddy.
That's really good because I was actually just talking about Kirkwood really poorly, so I'm glad I was muted there. Yeah, last time.
Be careful what you say about Kirkwood. He'll come back. He got a chat that'll get you.
Don't worry.
Watch out with Kirk.
He's got
Don't
Juggalo
go down
Nation
that
behind
road.
him. Much as you're
He's
wearing
got a bunch
Juggalo
of-
Nation.
Trust me, he doesn't
Juggalo
need it.
Nation is not a friendly bunch. I'll tell you that much.
Trust me, in the past, he hasn't needed anybody to do his dirty work. Last time I saw Kirkwood, he hip checked me on a basketball court while we were playing basketball in the RG basketball game like 4 years ago. So everyone's saying he's a man of the people, but I guess I don't see that side of him because I think I'm still bruised.
Because you took a hip check, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I haven't really gotten
dirty.
too deep into Rainmakers yet.
Yeah, me either. And the way Squirrel was talking about it, I don't know if I'm going to be diving anytime soon. What is your view on that game, Kyle? And let me ask this: you can make one stack. You're making one lineup, and you're making a stack of this game. Are you starting with Mahomes, or are you starting with Lawrence?
I'd be starting with Lawrence, but I like the breakdown that Bobby had on Kelsey. I think a lot of if Mahomes has a massive game, it's hard to predict where it's going to go from a receiver's perspective, other than Kelsey, right? So I think you can start with Lawrence, use one or two Jags, and then bring it back with Kelsey, and you can really feel like you have a good chance at having all the production in this game. So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to key in on. And I think the Christian Kirk topic is a very interesting one. He was a guy who I think we were all pretty surprised as he, played less than 50% of snaps, wasn't running a ton of routes compared to some other guys on the team. Obviously, Zay Jones ran more routes. He was playing in two wide receiver sets, and Christian Kirk was kind of in the sidelines there at times. That's something that you can bank on, just changing just over the fact that they're going to be potentially in more three wide receiver sets as they're throwing more in a different game script. And obviously Christian Kirk, don't forget about the paycheck that he gets. It's a lot. So they're going to have incentive to use him. So I think that could be a spot where, you're looking at a guy who's sub 5% owned because of what we, I guess, didn't see last week. And I think Christian Kirk's a really sharp call. I like Zay Jones as well. I think all three of these Jags receivers are in play. But yeah, I think that's a really good tournament play. And I would probably look to start Lawrence, Ridley, and then one of Jones and Kirk, and then bring it back with Kelsey. That's my ideal stack in that game there.
Your favorite Kansas City darts? Mine is McKinnon. Who's yours? I'm talking darts. Not Kelsey is basically what I'm asking.
Yeah. Man, I think it would have to be McKinnon as well for me, but I think I would feel inclined to say Sky Moore just because he played so much last week, and they had 7 active receivers and he played 73% of snaps or whatever it was. I know it was over 70, and he didn't get targeted at all. Obviously, Tony forgot to wear his hands in that Thursday night game, so maybe he's in the doghouse a little bit. But again, he didn't play a lot, but he was targeted on, I think, over 60% of his snaps. So he's clearly a guy that they're looking to get the ball to, or we're looking to get the ball to when he's on the field. So I guess I would say Sky Moore if taking a stab at a receiver. McKinnon, he takes up a really valuable spot today. So that's the issue that I have with McKinnon. So I guess that would lead me to saying Sky Moore, but I don't feel overly confident in any of these Kansas City darts, I guess.
Shout out to Bobby, who's multitasking and answering season-long questions in chats. Nicely done, Bobby.
Yep. I had to do your job. I know you're the season-long guy. Like Kirky, 10 minutes before a lock.
I did have some DMs asking about season-long, and I actually answered them. I did, and this isn't to say, please come at me with your season-long questions.
That seems like a look at me situation. Answering season-long DMs, I do everything.
It came up organically. I wasn't like that. I didn't open with that. It was pertinent to the conversation, but I did answer some DMs.
Speaking of people like hitting you up, I have this one kid from my neighborhood that like literally calls me 5 minutes before lock to ask me season-long questions like every Sunday, and it is unbelievable.
He just wants a friend, Bobby.
It's like clockwork. No, I do not answer. No, not at all.
A psychopath would answer.
What a psycho. No. Yeah.
You got
I'm looking at the phone. I'm like, oh, here's this lunatic.
I mean, at least text me. I have some decency. But
don't text me. Don't.
Well, the calling is even more egregious. But
yeah, the calling is in 2023. The calling is egregious. I will say
it's on you. You gave him your number. It might be kind of on you.
Well, everyone has everyone's number, Dean, these days, right? Like, it's how you text.
Fair enough. All right. Let's talk about Seattle and Detroit. Kyle, I know this game is one you want to talk about. This is the rematch of the game last year that was scored 90+ points or so. I believe Amon-Ra didn't even play in that game. Seattle, 4.5-point dog here in the Dome versus the Lions. Start wherever you want to start, Kyle, but I know you're saying this game is one of the more appealing ones for you.
Yeah, I think it's just a classic case of a game or a team or a player being written off based on something that I do think we probably aren't that great at predicting. Like, for example, I think the public, the DFS as an industry, are pretty good at predicting, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, these sorts of things. But, this game's being written off because of 2 offensive tackles being injured for Seattle. Like, I think I feel pretty comfortable in saying that us as an industry, we're not too keen on, projecting backup linemen. Like, for all we know, it could be a moot point, right? And Detroit pass rush should be pretty good or should be better than last year, and I think they have some guys there. But if this is a spot where we're just ignoring this game strictly because of 2 offensive linemen being banged up, I think that could really be a mistake. And the Vegas total is still up there, 47.5. So they're still projecting a fairly high scoring game. So I think that we should probably listen to that over, fantasy analysts talking about offensive tackles being out. So this is a spot where I'm just looking to be, on a spot that I think the field's overlooking because of something that they might not be that great at predicting or projecting. So that's pretty much the basis to the play. Obviously, there's a lot of highly valuable fantasy assets in the game as well, especially from a receiver standpoint. Amon-Ra, obviously, and then on the Seattle side, Lockett, Metcalf. So the running backs are also solid in this game. So that's pretty much the basis behind my interest in this game.
Kyle obviously doesn't know ball, right? Like, that's
has your hand ever been in the dirt before, Kyle? Ever once?
What's that?
Has your hand ever been in the dirt?
No, I was always stand-up guy, never in the trenches. Do you see my build, Dean? I'm way too small for that.
Dean was in the trenches.
Yeah, I was an eligible player every once in a while. No, I never played football, organized football, but I was more of a baseball, soccer guy. But Bobby, I
could see you playing soccer. The Big Green, remember that movie?
Big Green. That's your go-to soccer movie.
Yeah.
What's the Will Ferrell vehicle?
Kicking and Screaming.
There you go, Kicking and Screaming.
Yeah, Kicking and Screaming. Yep.
Yeah, and just an old one that Rocky was in prison. Glory. What was that called? I can't remember what that was called.
What about She's the Man?
Yes, She's the Man. That was filmed at UCF. Parts of it. There you go.
Okay.
Right. Don't care about this. Such things. But,
drink. Dean said UCF on the show.
Hey, what about Latavius Murray and Brandon Marshall and Gabe Davis? We'll talk about Gabe Davis at some point for sure. Bobby, your thoughts as far as Seattle and Detroit? And it is a good point, by the way, Kyle's making, because who are we? We're pretending that we know about offensive linemen. Now, they did get, I hate the term, off the street, like Jason Peters. I'm sure he has a house. He's 41 years old. He played in the NFL for a long time. They got him off the street. Like, he wasn't just, like, hanging out on the corner. Like, I'm sure he's doing fine for himself. But, like, yeah, is he coming in? Is he playing today? I don't know. Some patchwork on that offensive line for Seattle, but maybe we are overthinking that. Bobby, what's your take as far as Seattle and Detroit?
Yeah, so I'm in the camp of worried about the offensive line. Seattle also ran 46 plays last week with a healthy offensive line, so it makes me a little bit worried. I like the Detroit side a ton. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the wide receiver I think gets squeezed, and I'm going to have a ton of him. I'm going to be over the field significantly. I think Montgomery, he's like a fringe cash game player. I wouldn't play him in cash, but if you showed up with him in cash, like, it's fine. This Lions O-line is, I think it's pretty much the best rating versus the Seattle D-line, so it's a really good spot for him, and I think Gibbs is a good tournament play for that reason as well. I'm trying to get different at the running back position, so I'm just thinking of every possible way. Trent Decker is out for the Lions, the left tackle. Maybe that has more to do with I don't know offensive line stuff either, but yeah, I'm just saying it might have something to do more with the passing game than the rushing game. But if it does have something to do with the passing game, like your blind side, getting the ball out quick to Amon-Ra St. Brown makes a ton of sense. On the Seattle side, like, I'm making a group max 1 of 3, Metcalf, Lockett, and Njigba. Njigba's been going to be worked in eventually, but they're running a lot of 2 tight end sets. But I do think he can get loose in the dome just because of the speed and, like, the high variance playmaker ability that he has. Lockett is the guy that is easily my favorite. Like I think Lockett scores a long touchdown today.
Wow.
Metcalf. I don't know what Metcalf said. He didn't feel like he put in enough effort last week, which I never want to hear from anyone. I know he caught a 10-yard touchdown in the end zone. He kind of got there because of it, but he was the only receiver and only Seattle player really to get there. And I don't know. I just much prefer Lockett or Njigba in the dome. I think Lockett by far and away is the best run back in my opinion.
I feel like Walker would have been a little more popular if we didn't have the Green Bay, if we didn't have Jones getting hurt and if we didn't have Eckler getting hurt. But now Dillon and Kelly are going to jump in and take some of that ownership. But theoretically, he's interesting. DJ Dallas playing too much last week is kind of annoying. Charbonnet still lurking, and they did draft him pretty high. But Walker's kind of in the mix. Do you have an official Walker take, Kyle? If you gave it, I apologize. I missed it. I was reading the chat.
I mean, I would prefer to play Walker over. I would prefer Walker over Dillon. So I'm kind of off of the AJ Dillon train. I think there's a lot of guys who are cheaper. I'd prefer both running backs. Actually, all three running backs in this game over AJ Dillon from a game theory perspective. Montgomery's $100 cheaper, Walker $100 cheaper, Gibbs slightly more expensive. But yeah, I like all three of these guys more than AJ Dillon. Obviously, you can't play both Montgomery and Gibbs together. But in terms of this game, Bobby brought up the plays ran. I think a lot of that kind of can come to the fact that they were just horribly inefficient. But they didn't play fast. Don't get me wrong, but they were 11th on this slate in terms of pace. So that, that's still, slightly above average on this slate in terms of pace. Obviously Detroit was top 3 in terms of pace. So this game, when you actually look at, both the teams playing in it, is the second fastest paced game when you look at the two teams facing off against each other. So I think, Bobby talked about pace, and I think I'm trying to sell Bobby on this game a little bit here. Forget about the offensive tackles.
I'm listening. Trust me, I'm listening. I know you're a sharp guy. I'm listening. That you've changed my opinion already.
Well, I don't want to, I think that this is just a game that I think is going, really overlooked. And I think in terms of if you run it out 100 times, I think it shoots out more than it doesn't here in this spot. So I think that's sort of where I'm at. And you mentioned Amon-Ra being the guy who gets squeezed. I think that's a really strong possibility, and that just makes this game look even better from a stacking perspective.
4.5 points. I was thinking I like Detroit before this conversation. I think I still like Detroit minus 4.5, but I think they win this game. You're going to say, Bobby?
We didn't speak about Reynolds. I think Reynolds is someone you have to consider at his price tag. And Raymond, if you do expect it to be a shootout, I would prefer Goff to Geno Smith. For whatever reason, I just like Goff a little bit better, especially with Geno behind that line. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts here.
I saw somebody in chat mention Marvin Jones. That's going too far. At the year 2023,
no,
it's over. I think it was a good run, but it's over. And Laporta is a solid tight end, certainly in the mix. The rookie looked pretty good in his first game. Would definitely play Reynolds before Jones. Would play Raymond before Jones. Probably not getting there either. But Kyle, from your reaction, there's no chance we're playing Marvin Jones, right?
Based on that week 1 game, Marvin Jones might be retired by week 6. That was horrible. And then 2 other quick points about this game is the total the spread actually moved closer despite all the injuries on the offensive line. It opened up at 5.5 down to 4.5. Not a huge move, but it's at least it's not going the other way. And then another thing is I think you can play this game and you can do mini stacks and mini correlations without using the quarterbacks in this one either. So I think you can pair Amon-Ra with one of the Seattle receivers or with Walker, or you can do a lot of things in this game. You don't necessarily need to use the quarterbacks in this game as well.
I told the people I would read off some of their hot takes. Let me go ahead and pull them up. Let's see how good the hot takes are or they're not. They've been submitting them to my Twitter account. I said if you get the most accurate hot take amongst all those submitted, you'll get yourself 2 weeks free of RG Premium. Bobby, feel free to be as vicious as you want to be. Summon your inner sign, right? And also, some of these takes aren't going to be that hot. Eric submitted a couple in chat. We'll see that he's throwing them into the Twitter as well. And let me know. 5, I guess, is like scalding and you like it. 1 is you hate it. Feel free. Let me know. And Kyle, by all means, as well. Feel free to jump in. Jets defense highest scoring point per dollar on slate. That's not a hot take. They're 2.7. Why is that a hot take? It's not hot.
I like the call in GPPs for sure. I just don't. I'll give it a 4. I'm a little bit more bullish on it than Dean.
Oh, you're summoning your inner Howie Mandel. You're being the kind one.
Yeah. I'm the good cop. You give me the bad cop.
I feel like I was wearing sunglasses. All right. So, here's our boy Erik in chat. Lippy. So Cam Akers, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle, do we like that call?
A lot of my season-long teams sure would, but I'm not feeling too confident about it after last week's usage.
Yeah, Williams, and they talked about him last year before he got hurt. Like, yeah, this guy's is gonna get some run, and I think he got hurt in the very first play of the season on special teams or something like that, and we never really saw him again. Maybe at the end of the season, I think we might have saw him. But yeah, he legit was a big part of that backfield. And why would they go back to? I guess Akers is gonna be there, but I don't totally see it either. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Gabe Davis goes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns from JR. Bobby, this was my bold call on your spaces last night. Top 5 receiver, net points, and he catches 100 yards. He catches at least a 50-yard touchdown. He gets loose in the secondary. He catches the longest touchdown in the slate. How about that? Is that hot enough for you?
I think it's a good bold call. Thank you for plugging my spaces, man of the people. Good guy, Dean. What a friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I was happy to jump on for sure. I was fired up. It was in my perfect time zone, 11 o'clock at night. That's when that's when you get peak Dean for sure. Kyle, you like Gabe Davis and Buffalo? We'll get to that game in a second, I'm sure. But Diggs obviously gonna be popular. One of the things I haven't built the lineup just yet, but in my head, the game stack for Buffalo and the Raiders, and I know Diggs is spectacular, but a way to be a little bit different. I'm thinking Allen, Diggs, Kincaid, and then all the congestion of Jacobs and Adams. Those 5 as a core for a game stack. Do you like it?
Yeah, I do. No, you said no Diggs?
Yeah, well, I love Diggs, but I got to be a little bit, I'm thinking Davis and Kincaid and Allen.
Kincaid. Okay, yeah. In terms of a lot of the Allen lineups, you have to assume that they're going to have Diggs. So if Allen is the guy who's winning tournaments and Diggs is not doing that, you're probably right in assuming that that's going to go to Davis and Kincaid. And obviously, these are still 2 teams that have pretty condensed usage rates across the board. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And this could be, a contrarian way to approach this game for sure.
I love the big swing here by Matt. Deontay Hardy is the highest scoring wide receiver below 5K. And Bobby, that's the other way this can go. This is the only way I was thinking about backtracking is because there's a chance if Gabe Davis stinks again. And he wasn't really great last year. And he's been giving a big opportunity to be the wide receiver too, by default, kind of sort of somewhat. But Hardy has been elevated to some degree. And there's a chance that Hardy, unseats Davis, maybe even this game. Who knows? Not trying to make people paranoid. But I think that's a really interesting take. You have a thought beyond Davis? Is Hardy somebody that's on your radar? I know last week, I think he was he 3K? I had him in some teams last week because he was so cheap. Or is that just too much? We're thinking too hard with this one? Maybe for millionaire stuff like large field. Hardy.
I think for large field, Hardy makes a good bit of sense. Shakir lost playing time to Hardy. Davis is in a situation where it could go. Ken Dorsey may feed him for the touchdown, or maybe he takes stuff away from him. I feel like he was on him pretty hard in that press conference. So yeah, for me, I think it'll probably be the squeaky wheel narrative where Davis does catch a long one, but I would definitely throw Hardy in my player pool.
Let's see. Oh, Bobby, this guy, I think I found your burner on Twitter. Andrew, I'm doing Andrew with air quotes. Tank Dell, 7 for 125 and a touchdown. You love talking about Tank Dell. 80%
Tank
of
Dell
pretty
is very
sure.
good, Dean, at 3K. He's a very good player. Great route runner.
He just likes saying his name, I think.
Yeah, Tank, he's a tank.
He's actually he's not. He's
not a tank. He's actually a very miniature person.
Yeah, we did the Google the other day, and the reason why is because I think he had a big head. I think his mom or somebody he hurt coming out. Apparently, was the read between the lines, and that name just sort of stuck. But yeah, you want to sell Tank Dell to the people?
Who, me? Yeah, I could sell. Yeah. I think Tank Dell's a really good play. That game is paced up. I like Nico Collins as well. Both corners for the Colts are out. It's 2 journeyman corners there. So I think that those receivers are in a good spot. I was hoping Mills would play because I think he's a better thrower of the football than CJ Stroud, and it's pace up. And in the pace up games, like people are going to play Richardson, they're going to play Lawrence, they're going to play Mahomes. No one's going to play the Texans QB. Mills is not playing though. So yeah, I like Tank Dell. I like Nico Collins. Nico Collins looked very good last week. I think Dalton Schultz is somewhat in play, although tight end is loaded, so I don't think you really need to go there. But yeah, for me, at Dell at 3K is definitely going to be is definitely someone I'm going to be overweight on in GPPs.
You guys are both tournament focused. You both kind of let your thoughts out as far as the chalky running backs. Here's Josh talking about Josh Kelly, less than 6 DK points. Yeah, Kyle, what are you doing with Kelly today? Kelly, one of the more popular running backs, basically is going to be in all cash lineups today, which makes sense. But you're not looking for ceiling games. You're not looking to like finish first in cash. That's not the goal. Just going to beat everybody else or more than 50%. You know how it works. But yeah, Kelly in tournaments, less than 6 DK points. I know Bobby wasn't a fan. He's already talked about it as far as in tournaments getting less in the field. That's where you're at as well, Kyle?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I'm more willing to eat the Kelly chalk than the Dillon chalk. There's so many pivots to AJ Dillon. He's really not cheap. Like, sure, he's stepping into a role, and obviously in years past when we've seen Aaron Jones sit, AJ Dillon has had a better role than Aaron Jones had in games that he was healthy. So I think the role is going to be fine, but I think this offense last week when Aaron Jones was on the sideline looked absolutely terrible. So I'm not really overly confident in AJ Dillon. In terms of Kelly, I can sort of get behind that a little bit more than Dillon because he is cheaper. He's 5K flat, but again, if you can spend an extra $500-600, you have a lot of pivots here in this range. So he's probably a guy that I'll also be underweight on just because again, I think that there's some higher upside plays and I don't think it's an automatically. I think people are assuming that it's a given that Josh Kelly is going to, shoulder the load here. But they have a couple of guys that they can use, the way that they used Kelly last week as that alternate running back option. So I would not be surprised to see more of a two-headed monster in the Chargers backfield, and it's a tough matchup here.
I think it was Dotson they mentioned is going to get some work. I can't pick Elijah Dotson out of the lineup, but I'm told he's going to get some run in this game. They also have Isaiah Spiller lurking. We talk about Tennessee being a tough team to run against as well. 31%, Bobby, is the current projected ownership. This is for large field stuff. It's going to condense in single entry. It's going to condense in 3-entry max. 31% for Kelly, Dillon at 19%. Number 1, number 2 as far as running backs. And, we'll do good chalk, bad chalk in a little bit, but this is kind of like a tease for it. Tell the people why that is bad chalk.
Yeah, for me, Kelly's the one that I am going to play. Like Dillon, I'm totally out on. He's getting the X button. Rashad White currently getting the X button. The Evans news is interesting to me with Rashad White because if he's out, seeing so much for the market share that he did and Baker being a check down monster, I think it would open up Rashad White more in GPPs. I don't know if we have that news yet or not. And Kelly is someone that I think you should definitely be in your player pool, but I wouldn't go crazy with Kelly. Over the field or below the field. I mean, at the field or below the field is pretty much how I would play Kelly in tournaments.
You got anything on Mike Evans, Kyle? I'm looking for it now. Do we expect him to play or we're not sure?
I haven't seen anything on Evans.
You asked me the Evans question. You asked me the Evans question last night, Dean. That's why I thought Evans was playing, but that threw a wrench for me.
Let's see. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I saw an old report or something like that, and I just kind of made that up. I wouldn't make it up, but I could have possibly misheard something. But I thought he maybe missed practice on Friday. But we're projecting him in for what it's worth. So maybe I goofed and just kind of jumped the gun on that one.
I just want to get off Rashad White. Like him and Dillon just seem like egregiously bad chalk. I think the way to play this is to spend up at the running back position and basically flip the build.
CMC,
Bijan, Barkley, like these are the Gibbs. Like get different at the RB position, find value at the wide receiver position. Like there's a ton of it, but there's also value at the running back position. Like you hit on Jerick McKinnon. I think Jerick McKinnon at 4.6 is a really good play. Pacheco, you could even make an argument for. Like Damian Harris isn't going to be owned. We don't know if Cook's getting all the high value touches in that offense. Like Cooks could be just a between the 20s guy. Lat Murray came in 2 minutes. That's an issue. And I see Cook like hitting optimal percentages around the industry pretty heavily. So Damian Harris at 5'5", like why couldn't he be that guy, right? Because we really don't know how they want to play this. Like, I hope that with the lack of a pass rush, Cook is in the game more for Buffalo, because I think that's why he was coming out, because of his pass blocking to Latavius Murray in 2 minute. Maybe that changes. I like Cook as a play anyways, going to have him, but I think Damian Harris is a sneaky running back that no one's going to play that you could possibly play in that 5K range. And another one, Zach Moss. Like, if someone showed up in cash games with Zach Moss, like, I wouldn't hate that. Like, if he sees 60% of the snaps in a pace-up game, I know, Dean, you hit on 60% of the snaps was like your guess last night.
Yeah.
Which could be kind of stretching it, but still, like, I don't think it's the worst pit. Like, he's going to be someone I'm over on in GPPs for sure.
Yeah, so no Jonathan Taylor, Evan Hall, bless you. Evan Hall's gone as well as far as Indy. They did have Jake Funk lurking. Deion Jackson, like, if Kadarius Toney didn't have the worst football game last week, it was Deion Jackson, who had 13 carries for 14 yards and lost 2 fumbles. Moss's injury wasn't a leg or a thigh or an ankle. It was his arm, or it was his wrist, right? So, like, I assume he's in shape and good to go. I don't know how much you're going to push him. The tricky part is at the goal line, it's probably going to be Richardson before anybody else. I would give a slight lean to Moss versus Jackson, but there is a ton of variance there. Kyle, you're on the projection team. I'm not sure what did you guys come up with as far as the usage there with Indy, because it's a tough call because we haven't seen it before.
Yeah, so we ended up, obviously Richardson's going to be a big part of the run game. So he was, Richardson was taking about 30% of the rush share, and then we had, Zach Moss getting, a good, I think it was close to double the amount of rushing share that we had compared to Deion Jackson, but Jackson being the third down guy, which I think that's a spot that could be up in the air. Jackson was the guy who was using the pass game at times last year pretty frequently. So that's kind of where we projected the roles currently. And I think that makes some sense. But the thing about Moss is I think he has upside to just get all of the work here. I think it's very easy for the Colts to just say goodbye to Deion Jackson after the week that he had last week. But also Moss was good for them last year. So I think that the ceiling is there for Moss to really see I think you could see 15 carries if this game goes well for the Colts and they are controlling the pace and they're winning. He could see 15 carries, and I think you do have to worry about Richardson at the goal line, but I wouldn't necessarily ignore the fact that in the one tush push that they did at the goal line at the end of the game last year, he came out hurt. He hurt his knee and his ankle or whatever it was. So I wouldn't necessarily ignore that. I don't know if
That's a really good call.
It's a long season.
You watch ball, ball.
I don't know if I'm in they're not going to do any QB sneaks at the goal line because Richardson's banged up, but it's something that adds to the potential path to Moss finding the end zone.
If he does get vultured, like, it's kind of priced in at 4.7 too. You've solidified my Moss take. I'm definitely getting 2x Moss at least.
Are you playing any Jackson or no? Just no Jackson.
I'll have no Jackson. None for me.
I'm seeing Moss at like 1%, right? It might be higher than that, but I don't know how much higher it's going to be than that, because I think people are scared and there's a lot of options.
Can't play scared, Dean. You can't play scared.
What, scared money don't make money? Is that
scared money don't make money, Dean? Yep.
I remember hearing that all the time playing poker with my dopey friends. But by the way, I did drop the weather report. People in chat were talking about weather. It is yellow in Tampa, according to Chief Meteorologist Kevin Roth. Typical afternoon Florida pop-ups. Not much to say here other than a chance of a spotty downpour, which is kind of an oxymoron, but I get what he's saying, being somebody that lives in Florida. Green in Cincinnati, they're talking about the weather in Cincy, and I'm sure he'll update this. We're still 2.5 hours out until kickoff as far as the 1 o'clock games. Do want to mention about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15, give or take. You get Erik Beimfohr. You get SquirrelPatrol. They're going to be taking you guys up to crunch time. Crunch time takes you all the way up the lock. We're not going anywhere until 1 o'clock. Do hit that like button. Do subscribe. Do turn on those notifications. Hit all the things. Hit all the buttons. Were there any other hot takes that I wanted to focus on? Oh, I did see a hot take in chat from one Christopher Jamino. I don't know if you guys saw this. Chris Jamino said Daniel Jones. Remember him? Quarterback 1. We talked about him last night, Bobby, and you were not very complimentary. The first game we can kind of throw out. We were throwing out that game. And I'm told Arizona is just laying down. Like, they're not trying. They're just not going to play football. That's what I've been told. They're tanking. But, yeah, it feels like a good spot for a bounce-back game. And, Daniel Jones is right there. Bobby, Daniel Jones? And who do you pair him with? I guess it's Waller, most likely?
It's most likely Waller. I think Waller is an interesting pivot. He's going to see a good market share of their offense in the passing game. I just can't bring myself to play Daniel Jones just because it's like as a best ball influencer is really where it comes from. Like,
sure,
I was on the other side of that take, like the Daniel Jones it might be my only good best ball call of the year because my teams are terrible.
That's the one you want to focus on, just as a best ball. It's just for a little bit of advice. Just make sure that's the one you want to lead with, and everything else put in the fine print.
No, I don't know. Jones is fine if you want to save money. I just don't think there's really a need to, right? Jalen Hyatt didn't play a ton of snaps, but he obviously is a high variance guy in large field stuff. If you want to go there with Jones and Waller doubles, you don't even have to really double Jones because he has the rushing equity. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I'm not a Daniel Jones guy. Dean, you know my take. I feel like that's why you asked me the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Kyle? As far you want to give the positive side, is that a sneaky game stack maybe on Arizona's? Like Connor's popping a little bit. He's coming up. Or do you want no part of that? It's a West Coast game, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate and to talk about the positive, there's a real chance that Daniel Jones played the best defense in football last week in Dallas, and they got ran through, and obviously the weather wasn't great. But the first drive, he looked fine. He looked like he's going to have some rushing upside, and then obviously things went sideways quickly after the blocked field goal. I don't think anything went right after that. Arizona could be the worst defense in football, so it could be very opposite ends of the spectrum here. For the Giants, I do prefer Barkley. He's my preferred Giant play. In terms of a game stack, I don't necessarily like it a whole lot just because, if I'm playing Jones, I'm probably pairing him with Waller. The receivers are kind of sketchy in terms of their snap share and their target involvement. And then in terms of Arizona, James Conner, I guess, is somewhat interesting. Like, he's actually close enough in price to A.J. Dillon where I think he'll be lower owned than he was, projecting Tuesday or Wednesday, which there's a couple of guys that fit that trend, like Connor, Cook, Rashad White. All these guys were probably going to be pretty popular and now won't be or won't be as popular because of Dillon and Kelly. So I think Connor makes some sense there, but I'm not like overly excited about it. And then, if you really wanted to get crazy and you really like watching like paint dry, Zach Ertz at 3,500. He had 10 targets last week. So if you really wanted to punt and not punt with Musgrave, Ertz is a guy down there. I don't know if the ceiling's all that great. I prefer Okonkwo at that price as a pivot. Probably prefer Irv Smith as a pivot at that price too if you're not playing Musgrave. But Ertz, I think it would be difficult to say he's not in play after having 10 targets last week.
10 targets for 21 yards is some kind of that's special.
Yeah, the Josh Dobbs effect.
I want to make a statement, and then I have a question for Kyle. First of all, these projection guys are in cahoots, right? Like Jamino in chat, Kyle here, like just going at me. But anyways, who is Michael Wilson? Is he? Because I've seen him pop a little bit. Do you have anything on him that you could kind of?
He's on my best ball teams. You should know who he is as a best ball influencer, just for the record. He was a guy that people were taking in the 18th round. But go ahead, Kyle, take the question.
Yeah, I think he's a third or fourth round pick out of Stanford. And he was sort of taking some snaps away from guys like Rondale Moore and Greg Dortch, who was a hero at times last year. Let me pull up his snap counts from last week real quick, if I can do that. He played 88% of snaps last week, untargeted. It looks like that might be an input error. No, actually, he had 4 targets. Sorry. So 88% of snaps, 4 targets. I mean, he was essentially, if you look at those roles outside of targets, he was the wide receiver 1. He played the most snaps, had 1 fewer target than Hollywood Brown. But yeah, Ertz and James Conner led the team in targets. Conner had 5. Brown also had 5, but Ertz had 10, and then Wilson had 4.
Interesting.
I got a question for you guys. Tell me good chalk, bad chalk, right? Good chalk, just jump in. Puka Nacua is getting 15% ownership, give or take, on DK, 4.9K, jumping up from 3K. He was playing the Cooper Kupp role last week. Probably going to be playing from behind today. Good chalk, bad chalk. Are we in on Puka? Are we still buying? It's possible this is still too cheap. Like maybe there's, it's going to grow or it's going to sustain. Kyle, you're a projection guy. Like, how do you project Puka? Because we have one game where he was spectacular and got all these targets. And like, is that going to be how it's going to go going forward? Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, it was difficult. We had a lot of conversations about Puka and trying to break down where these receivers were going to be. And, we settled on him being the most targeted receiver on the team, obviously, but I think like 22 or 23% of the targets compared to, I think he had like 35% of the targets last week. Obviously, you can't possibly project that again. And obviously, this is a fairly difficult matchup with the 49ers, but I do think him popping up on the injury report actually nerfed his ownership a little bit. So I think if you did like Puka, you should like him more now because he'll be less popular than he was before that injury report. So I don't want to say he's good chalk, but is there an intermediate chalk answer, or do I have to?
There's the field. There's the field.
Are you with the field? You could just lay up and sit on the fence.
Say it's fine.
You don't want to take a stand. Yeah, just say you're.
It's fine. I think
in my personal
me on Twitter last night saying it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'll personally have below the field on Puka just because there's some pivots that I like and some other games that I like. But if you were a Puka fan, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It's fine.
Bobby, is it fine?
It's fine. Yep. I'm playing Zay Flowers ahead of him. I'm playing Jalen Dotson ahead of him in the same price range. But yeah, he's going to be my player pool at the field, maybe less than the field. But these guys that I'm giving like specific guys that like are in that range, Dotson, Flowers, that I'm definitely getting over on. I think you have to play him because there is the possibility that he is in that Cooper Kupp role. But yeah, it's not. So he's not a full fade.
Bobby, Jaden Reed, where are you at as far as Jaden Reed? He's going to be someone that might, he's kind of fringy for cash if you're going to go an extra star or two. Where do you have Jaden Reed? 3.4K on DK. We talked about Green Bay being limited as far as some of their injuries.
I'm playing him. He's fine. For me, I think I'm going to play Tank Dell more.
Is Dell getting any ownership? I feel like you're the only person talking about Dell.
No, Beimfohr is on Dell. People are on Dell, Dean. I'm telling you.
He's getting 1% ownership for the record.
Okay. No, I'm playing like, I don't know. I haven't decided on Jaden Reed's tough. Is Jaden Reed good? Is anyone in this offense good? Like, I don't know. Like, that's what I'm saying. That game environment's terrible. Who can we pay up from him for, Jaden Reed for in that range? Like, is there anyone that would kind of pay, like 3.8, 3.9? How about Renfro, 3.9?
Tyler
Reynolds. Yeah, I'd play Reynolds over. I'd play Reynolds over Reed.
Boyd.
I like Renfro on DK for tournaments with what's his name out there in a game that
has Hunter Renfro ever been on a GPP winning lineup? Has that ever happened?
I like Hunter Renfro. I'll play him. I can play him. He's definitely gone downhill, but they need it. They need someone to step up out of that receiving core. Like it was Myers got all that usage last week, and they split up one target between four other receivers. Someone's going to split away from the pack here in that game. Like I would definitely have Renfro in my player pool and larger field stuff. I don't know, Dean. You seem to like Jaden Reed.
Boyd. Nobody responded to Tyler Boyd.
I think Boyd's fine. Like I've seen Boyd hit stuff. I just don't like playing Boyd. I'd rather play Chase or Higgins. But yeah, Boyd makes a good bit of sense in that range as well.
Kyle, you got anything on Boyd, or he's just fine?
I think he's fine. I think that there's a couple other guys that in that range I like. In terms of Reed, like I think if you were playing Reed to not play AJ Dillon, like just to get a piece of that offense, like I think that's where he would be better chalk. I know it's still going to be popular, but I prefer Jaden Reed chalk than AJ Dillon chalk, which might sound strange, but obviously the price really helps that. But the thing about Reed is we still feel like it's pretty unknown, right? I know Aaron Jones and Watson are out, so the role seems pretty solid, but there's a lot to not know there. And that's the case for a lot of these cheap receivers. Josh Reynolds, he had a 28% target share last week. I think I would prefer him. We've talked about Renfro. Michael Wilson, I think, has a case to be made with how often he played. Another guy who I think is going to be extremely low owned, Tank Dell is in the same game, but Josh Downs, he played a ton in the slot as well. So he's a guy who's, I think, going to be kind of a DJ Moore light type player. And obviously, Anthony Richardson looked okay as a passer, better than I thought he was going to look as a passer. So Downs is the guy that I like. And Bobby said it a couple times, it should be a pretty up and pace game. So he's a guy that I also have interest in. So there's a lot of pivots off of Reed. So I think I probably, would lean going away from him a little bit more, but I do like him more than the AJ Dillon chalk if you're looking to eat some of this chalk from the Packers.
Kirkwood's throwing out Metcalf. I don't think Metcalf's going to get much ownership. Jets Cowboys, is this a game we're just mostly ignoring? Two of the best defenses in the league, it looks like. The Dallas without Cooks, like Gallup might step up a little bit. I think Ferguson's popping a little bit. What are you doing with that game in general, Kyle? And also Ferguson versus Musgrave. Do you have a clear take as far as your punt tight end, or you can go off the board, like somebody behind door number 3?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite punt tight end's going to be Okonkwo today. I don't think he'll be necessarily completely low owned, but he'll be lower owned than Musgrave. And I think in smaller field contests, you'll see the discrepancy kind of get wider there. So Musgrave, I think, is fine. I like him just fine. But Okonkwo, I think, could potentially, he played a lot last week. He played over 90% of snaps, ran a route on, nearly 70% of dropbacks there. And Hopkins didn't practice at all this week. It sounds like he's going to play. And we know that he's, not practicing and played pretty much full plenty of times over the course of his career. But it's definitely not great to see. And I think this team's going to have to throw a lot against the Chargers here. And then, sorry, what was the front end of that question?
Just the Jets Dallas as a general thought. What are you doing with that game?
Yeah, I'm mostly going to avoid this game, but I do think that we're going to see a spot where you can really, have an edge just by playing Tony Pollard. I think people don't quite realize the role he's going to have and how big it's going to be.
Asking in chat about Cordell Patterson. He's probably going to make a season debut today. Just really murky as far as figuring out that Atlanta, the rushes with Robinson and now Algier, and Drake London was hitting some optimals, and you have to throw the ball in order for them to catch the ball. And what a mess Atlanta is. I have no idea. Kyle, how do you project Drake London? What do you do with that? Because theoretically he should be good, but I don't know.
Yeah, Atlanta's a weird situation because, in theory, they do have a pretty condensed offense, but they just don't throw the ball enough. They're adding obviously Cordell Patterson back to the fold. I'm sure we'll see him used in unique ways after they gave him a unique spot on the depth chart, the Joker spot, whatever that means. I guess we're gonna find out sooner rather than later. But the thing is, you can project Drake London for a 28% target share, and he still doesn't project well because he's getting 4 targets. So that's the kind of the downside of Atlanta here.
Yeah, 28% of 10 is not great.
Right.
Right. Oh, the target share is at 30%. Okay, but how many throws?
Exactly.
I'll take 20% of 40 in a different team. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can just have some fun with math there with that. Bobby, any thoughts there as far as Dallas and the Jets and the Atlanta backfield, or anything we kind of talked about, or maybe your favorite pivot cheap tight end?
Yeah, so I like everyone playing Dillon. I think Bijan's a really good play on the other side. He's going to be low owned. He hit on Dobbs. Kyle Granson is a cheap tight end I have interest in. If he's out, though, I think it pushes Dobbs up a little bit more if he's playing the slot. Granson had seen 6 targets last week as Richardson's tight end. I don't want to make that too sticky because we know how Indy's been in the past in terms of how their utilization of tight ends. What was the other question, Dean? The Jets Cowboys game. So I liked Pollard at the beginning of the week, but they have a couple issues on the O line, so I'm staying away from Pollard. With Cooks out, I think it bumps Gallup, Ferguson, Lamb, but I'm not going to have too many of those guys. So like you said, that's a defensive matchup, but it's not something I want to target too much.
Kirkwood in chat asking a question, Bobby. Etienne over these cheap running backs, is that the path? Well, you got to pay for it. Is it worth paying for it? I think it's a way to be a little bit different with Jacksonville. Ridley's going to be played more than Etienne. So it's interesting. Is that something you're considering? I'm trying to
figure if those targets from Etienne are going to be sticky with the 4 targets last week, because he didn't really see targets previously like that. At 6'9", I think he's fine as a pivot. He's in that pace-up game. It will depend for me where his ownership kind of lands. I like the McKinnon call in that game, Dean, at 4.6. I think that's really interesting based on what we know McKinnon is in that game environment.
What about McKinnon with a way to get Kelce and Mahomes is a little bit of salary savings. You can get McKinnon. Like all three of those guys can get there if that game shoots out. Is that something you would consider playing all three in the same lineup, Bobby?
McKinnon, Kelce, Mahomes, of course. I think it differentiates Kelce with Mahomes, and then if you add McKinnon, it's definitely going to differentiate the stack.
Is he one of your biggest stands in the slate, Kelce? I feel like you said that yesterday.
Kelce will be my Tyreek of this week. He will be on every team.
Like you're running, you don't care. You'll just hit a lock button and that's that. Like if they crush,
if you have conviction, you have conviction, Dean. You have to go with your gut. I'm not trying to go 10% here, 10% there. We know those kind of guys, right?
I feel like you're calling out Kyle because Kyle was on the fence earlier in the show. I don't know if that was some shade there. Just say what you want to say, Bobby. I mean, I don't know. Be direct.
It was a subtweet, Dean. It was a sub. What are they?
Do you have somebody like that, Kyle, that you're just hitting the lock button on and that's that? Like this is your guy? And if it doesn't go well, move on to the showdown slates.
I mean, not a lock button, but I'll be well over the field on Ja'Marr Chase. He's my guy today. And I think especially like in my smaller field stuff where, the 3 max single entry type contests where I'm in Rock could fit that build too, but I think one or two of these guys is just going to be, they're going to end up like 10% owned where people are expecting 20% owned. And then you'll see a guy like Diggs or Adams end up like 30% owned when we're expecting 20 to 25%. So I think Ja'Marr Chase is the guy that I'm looking at, but I like the Kelce call. But in terms of the ETN stuff, in terms of the way, I think the best way to play ETN is with a Mahomes stack using Kelce, McKinnon. I like that stack and then bring it back with ETN. But when talking about the stickiness of his targets, it looks pretty good. I mean, unless they activate Hasty and he ends up being involved or they start using Bigsby more as a pass catcher. ETN ran 29 routes last week, which was tied with Evan Ingram, 1 behind Zay Jones, 2 behind Calvin Ridley. So 88% route participation number there for ETN. That's going to be a really good number if he's able to maintain that in any game script, really. We
got Squirrel Patrol and Eric coming in here shortly. Kyle, you said Chase. You're going to have a ton of Chase. Who's your favorite run back on the Baltimore side?
It's probably going to be Zay Flowers. Obviously, elite role that he had last week. I think it potentially takes a decline naturally, but also because of Andrews coming back. But, like Zay Flowers quite a bit. Obviously, played a ton, saw the red zone work. I think he's got a lot of upside here in this spot and in this role.
We got Ebeimfohr and Squirrel Patrol, a.k.a. Rainmaker's influencer now. Sorry. I don't understand it. I don't fully understand it, but I think I'm going to stay away. I don't know. I feel like you found yourself in a pickle, according to your Twitter threads, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But am I better off not knowing, Squirrel?
Yeah, you're better off just staying far away. Like, don't even enter like DFS stuff that says Rainmakers. Like, it's a disaster. I'm furious. But anyway, moving on.
I apologize. I'm sorry for tilting you 2 hours before lock. But we discussed Rainmakers earlier in the show and you kind of came up. But all right, Eric, what's up? How's Sunday? Ready to go? Ready to do this thing?
It's great, Dean. You'll appreciate it. We watched the Barbie movie last night, my wife and I did, and we went and did the thing that you hate. I went and picked up popcorn from the movie theater. And got it, and we had our own little home, movie experience. And I know the last time, I don't think we were going to be friends afterwards because you were so upset about the fact that I went and paid $10 for movie theater popcorn just to eat it at home.
You put pants on and everything, like you left the house with this.
100%.
Do you realize that's like a bizarre behavior, right? Like, is it that incrementally better than like whatever you can make at home?
I mean, to be fair, Dean,
whoever?
Everything about my life is bizarre behavior. I talk about best ball drafts in March for a living, so I don't think anything I do is really particularly normal. But when you get married and you literally spend all your life, talking about football, and all Sunday you're like literally never going to see your wife all of Sundays for 5 months. You can make some concessions, and it's easier to lay on the couch and watch the movie than get up and go. But the popcorn's better. The popcorn's better from the movie theater.
Do you get like some goobers and some snow caps too, or just straight popcorn and that's that?
Just straight popcorn. We made an event out of it, but the only thing we got from the movie theater was the popcorn.
Can producer Steve, as we step aside and get out of here, producer Steve, put a poll in the chat asking if that is bizarre behavior. I want the people to chime in. Bobby, if you have a thought, Kyle, if you have a thought, otherwise we'll step aside and get out of here and make way for Squirrel and Erik. But I'm fascinated by this behavior. And by all means, I agree. Like, if this makes her happy, make her happy. Yeah, you got to pick your spots.
Yep.
And there you go. But Kyle, anything else for the road? We getting out of here? Do appreciate you jumping in here.
I'm all set. Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thanks for
That was
hopping
Bobby
on, Kyle.
Gomes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, thanks
all
for
right.
hopping on. Good luck, everyone, today.
All right, Erik, take it over yourself and Squirrel and enjoy the leftover popcorn.
Funny enough, there is leftover popcorn upstairs. No, does anyone ever eat the full tub? Like, I've never eaten a full tub of the movie theater popcorn. But anyway, enough about Barbie and popcorn and all of that good stuff. Welcome to GPP Final Takes here on RotoGrinders.com. Obviously, as you see, I am Erik Beimfohr, joined by my good friend John Breslin, aka SquirrelPatrol. If you have not watched this particular show before, we're not necessarily going to go position by position. We're not necessarily going to go game by game. We're going to try to bounce around to kind of all of the hot button items for tournaments specifically. If you have cash questions or, just 1v1, 2v2 questions, any questions at all, feel free to post them in the chat, but we're going to try to focus as much as we can on all of the highlights surrounding where we need to make our decisions for tournaments today. And of course, John, just like last week, we had obviously on Thursday night, no Travis Kelce, no Mark Andrews, overnight. Already week 2, Austin Eckler out, Aaron Jones out, handful of other guys missing games today. But before we dive into all that, how are you feeling? How's week 2? How was week 1 for you? We haven't chatted since last weekend.
Good. I joke I had a very Squirrel Patrol weekend. I picked up a live final seat for FanDuel.
That is a Squirrel Patrol weekend. Yep, yeah. That is.
hope to keep it going. The one lineup I did for FanDuel, the qualifier was like my very first single entry lineup, and I should have if I had just played that. Everything else after that was a worse lineup. So so I should have just stuck with that one lineup. But it worked out, and so hopefully keep that going.
Definitely, I'm. On one hand, last weekend went absolutely amazing. It's also impressive, though, to not really make money when I had a bunch of Puka Nacua. I played Kyron Williams on the afternoon slate. You hit on a bunch of those things, but way too much J.K. Dobbins, way too much of some of the, Isaiah Likely that we talked about. Some of those guys that just didn't come through last weekend, but I feel pretty good generally about everything. I didn't pick up a live final seat. We'll see if we can catch up today in that regard. But let's start to dive in, and I want to talk about those two running backs in particular, because there's a lot across this whole slate. I think there's a lot of fun plays really at every position, but it's hard to intro a slate any single week when there's major injury news and you don't kind of start there, because obviously the pricing comes out before we knew that Austin Eckler was out and before we knew that Aaron Jones was out. Probably the two most important players on their offenses. And now we removed them, and we have Josh Kelly at $5,000 on DraftKings for the Chargers. And we have AJ Dillon at $5,900 for the Packers. How are you just kind of assessing those spots? Are you just going to kind of eat some of the chalkiness of those guys? Or do you think that their ownership is appropriate? Just kind of assess those two spots first before we start to dive in.
Sure. So it does create some interesting dynamics, because the pricing's pretty different for all these guys on FanDuel and DraftKings. The pricing was set, and the pricing, there wasn't that much difference in pricing, I felt like, and then the injuries started to hit. And now $5,000 for Josh Kelly on DraftKings is a really good deal. So I think he's the running back I'm having the hardest time getting away from in terms of chalk on DraftKings, but it's actually not that difficult on FanDuel. On FanDuel, I still think you should maybe stick with some of the prior kind of convictions or that you might have had. These guys aren't as good of a deal, both AJ Dillon and Josh Kelly on FanDuel as they are on DraftKings. But $5,000 for Josh Kelly is pretty good on DraftKings. $5,900. I mean, AJ Dillon's definitely in play, and obviously not somebody who's really highly considering that much on DraftKings if Aaron Jones is going to be in. Mm-hmm. But with Aaron Jones out, he's much more compelling to put in the $5,900 guy. But there's still some other running backs that I think James Conner. I guess we've got him there third in ownership I'd be a little bit surprised if he really is third in
Same.
ownership, but I do like him as a play. I think people maybe are underestimating this Arizona team and underestimating like James Conner's role. Like we have maybe a narrative in our head about how we think the Cardinal season is going to play out. And I don't think they're going to like win the Super Bowl, but it may not play out exactly like we thought. Where, you know, I was thinking like, oh, like it's going to be a dumpster fire, and like they're going to like James Conner will end up splitting carries with some rookies by, you know, week 3 or 4. Undrafted free agents will come in. But like I don't think that's the case. Like James Conner is the main like primary running back there, and they're like going to try to at least play close competitive games and try to put up some wins on the season. So I think James Conner is definitely in play, and I don't know if he's going to like get ownership that's that high. Other running back I'm pretty high on is Rachaad White, because I think he's in a good situation this year, just in terms of like, especially on DraftKings, like getting a bunch of receptions. I think Tampa Bay will be a little bit better maybe than people were expecting post Tom Brady. And I expected him to get like piles of receptions last week. You know, it didn't happen, but he's like the main. He's the main running back on the team that's going to move the ball, and that's not something we get as often as we did, 5-8 years ago, where, this guy's the primary guy and he's going to be on the field, on third down and catching the check down passes from Baker Mayfield. So it's, those are the running backs that I'm pretty high on.
Yeah, it's funny. I played heaps of Rachaad White last weekend and feel like on one hand, I'm not sure he's particularly kind of similar to James Conner. I'm not sure he's particularly great at football, Rachaad White. So I wouldn't, be betting on him to dominate over the course of the season. But I actually think both of these guys are great examples of, our opinions on teams and players, like from when we come into the season, like you mentioned with the Cardinals, right? I don't think Rachaad White is good. I don't think James Conner is good. I don't think, if you're drafting your season-long team or your best ball teams, when you're looking to the fantasy playoffs, it might not be good for James Conner by then, right? He's old. He's an older running back. The Cardinals might stink, et cetera, et cetera. But this is DFS. This is week 2. I care about today, and that is it, right? What James Conner does in week 16 is totally irrelevant to what James Conner is going to do today and whether or not he can win me tournaments. I think that there are a lot of viable running backs. And so you mentioning those two guys as sort of pivots off of the chalk. And when I think about it from those two guys' perspective, especially, we're getting Josh Kelly and AJ Dillon as perceived workhorses, right, with big volume because the guy in front of them is not playing today. But James Conner and Rachaad White already had that. Like that was their baseline is, like 75-80% of the work in the backfield. Rachaad White seeded a little bit more maybe than I would have hoped late, particularly in the second half to Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker. But like high value touches, all that stuff, the like you said, the passing down role, that's the thing for both of those guys is like they're game script proof because their best asset is catching passes. And on DraftKings, give me 6 of those babies and find your way into the end zone at these prices. That's all I really care about. There's a few other guys that will go down here. We can start kind of with some running back stuff and then get to some game stacks and all of that. But I personally am not super excited about Josh Kelly or AJ Dillon. And it's mostly an ownership thing. Josh Kelly, we're 3% with this projection, right? And I would be playing him. But it's, if you recall, we just did this song and dance last week, like the same thing against the Titans. Running back is out for the Saints, right? Jamal Williams is going to get most of the work. I think Jamal Williams was a lock to get basically all of the work. Josh Kelly is definitely going to get the majority, but he's never really been thrust into a full-time role before. They have Isaiah Spiller. I don't know if the volume projection is as stable as maybe we want to make it out to be for Josh Kelly. He had a great week 1, of course, in the best game of the week, the biggest shootout of the week. But like, the Chargers are good. They're going to score points. I don't think Josh Kelly's going to score 3 fantasy points. Let's get that out of the way. Is Josh Kelly for sure going to win me tournaments? I don't know. I think even at $5,000, the Titans are one of those spots. We can say whatever we want about, and defenses don't matter and all of that. Mike Vrabel doesn't agree. Mike Vrabel is going to shut down the running game, and Josh Kelly is an in between the tackles runner, and hopefully he'll catch some passes with Austin Eckler out. That's what I think you're relying upon for sure. Goal line carries. The Chargers are going to score points, so you need Josh Kelly to get in the end zone. But I wouldn't be, expecting 18 carries for 100 yards out of Josh Kelly today. I would be hoping for some checkdowns, and I would be hoping, he's the general feature back and he gets in the end zone. And so when that's the case, I do kind of like to get away from those guys a little bit, similar to A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon looked, I'm trying to be polite, but he looked horrendous last weekend. Like him and like Deion Jackson and probably Rachaad White and some of these guys were like on a next tier of bad as a runner and everything. I think he's fine? Probably. But I also, if you remember, and if anybody's watching, remember, I'm kind of high on the Falcons defense this year. I think they really loaded up talent on the defensive side. The run defense is maybe the problem, so that's good for A.J. Dillon. But I also think we're like wash, rinse, repeat with A.J. Dillon. When Aaron Jones would be out with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback, it's like, oh, baby, yeah, I mean, I don't care. He's going to catch 6 passes. He's going to get the goal line work. When it's Jordan Love on the road, not a great spot. We know what Arthur Smith wants to do. Grind this baby down to a pulp. There may not be a lot of plays in this game. And so I just think there are some other spots at running back that in tournaments, I'm a little bit more interested in. If I need the 5K guy, right, whatever, and I have a pretty unique lineup as it is, by all means, play Josh Kelly. But I kind of like some other running backs, and I like maybe even like passing game for the Chargers as, leverage on Josh Kelly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking about with A.J. Dillon, a running back that's on the road as an underdog in a game with a 40-point total. And he's $500 or $400 more expensive than like Rachaad White, who already has we know he has the primary role
against the Bears, which is a pretty good spot. Those Packers that just beat the crap out of the Bears last weekend.
So we have Chris Tremino in chat saying he is actually going to move the ownership projection on Connor down a little bit. And I mean, it's interesting because I think we're showing him as higher owned. And I actually think he's a good play, to some extent. But I would be surprised if he's like the third highest owned running back, just because people are going to look at like names like Christian McCaffrey and Joe Mixon, and they're gonna click over, like they're gonna skip over James Conner. I think.
I totally agree. We will also be giving official inactives here in 15 to 20 minutes. So as those stream in, we will, of course, make sure to stay on top of all that. I don't think there should be too many surprises. We obviously get a lot of those overnight, Schefter bombs and all of that. But I'm mostly interested to see a guy who I want to bring up at running back. And technically, this could be 2 different guys. But it looks like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not going to play today for the Chiefs, which is like, I mean, we're talking about a bunch of bad running backs so far. We eventually got to get to some of the good players. Maybe we'll talk about, Christian McCaffrey at some point. But CEH stinks, right? Everybody knows it's a running joke. He's not very good at football, but like he plays, he gets the ball. He can do a little bit of both in terms of his role, not being good at it, but early down work and passing down work. You remove him from that backfield, all of a sudden, in particular for me, Isaiah Pacheco becomes very appealing. He did have 4 targets last week, actually kind of dominated-ish the work of the running backs. Jerick McKinnon, really, I thought he would have a little bit of a bigger role, especially without Travis Kelce, but he really didn't do anything, didn't get a carry last week, Jerick McKinnon. Now, I think that might change today, but it's one of those where that game is amazing. We know the Chiefs are great, right? The Chiefs are going to score, and we removed one of their running backs. Like, I'm not sure that the field is gravitating. Maybe they will once this news gets official, and CEH gets pulled out of every projection. But I think the Kellys and Dillons and those of the world, like, are not that much better than someone like a Pacheco or Connor or Rachaad White. I really like James Cook as well. I don't think that they're that different from those guys, but the ownership is going to be like way higher on those other spots. So I really like Pacheco as well as another pivot at running back.
Just on Pacheco, I like him a lot more on FanDuel than DraftKings. So he's 5,700 on both sites. And you bring up an interesting thing. I think you could make an argument on maybe he is going to get more passing game work, and then that makes him really appealing on DraftKings at extremely low ownership. But I particularly like using Pacheco on FanDuel if you are using like another game stack. So like if you're game stacking Buffalo, and the Raiders, then maybe use Pacheco as a running back, because then like if the Kansas City game goes that way, where Mahomes is not getting the touchdowns, it's like maybe Pacheco's getting 3 rushing touchdowns. No. Then you're kind of like using some kind of game theory leverage stuff to make, that's going to elevate the chances the Buffalo Raiders game is the game you need to have.
I totally agree. That's kind of what we'll get into those game stacks and stuff, but that's kind of how I'm feeling almost like this week in general, is that the leverage feels like kind of straight, like it's almost like too straightforward, right? Like people are going to play the Jags and Chiefs like pass games. I'm not saying Isaiah Pacheco and Travis Etienne are going to be 0%, of course, but what's going to be higher owned in tournaments? The Ridley, Kelsey, Zay Jones, Lawrence stuff, and the Bills passing game as well, right? You're going to get the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Devontae Adams, which we'll get to all that with Jacoby Myers hurt as well. And it's like, I can just stack a different game and play Isaiah Pacheco or play James Cook. And not only are they lower owned than the AJ Dillon, Josh Kelly guys at running back, their leverage on their teammates, which are really popular game stacks. And then in the inverse, we'll get to some of these game stacks as well. You can do things like the Chargers passing game. And it's like these are all good plays, and they all just happen to fit together as like this kind of compounding leverage at every single spot. You're not even like trying to get fancy. It's just like, if I told you could play a Charger stack with Pacheco and James Cook, like, would you be upset about that? I would. It seems like a pretty good play, but it turns into some leverage opportunities. And those are some of the ones I like the most, as opposed to like, sometimes we force, leverage and fancy play a little bit. This one feels like really, really straightforward. Let's polish up running back really quickly. Is there anybody else that we haven't mentioned that you haven't mentioned that you're really eyeing up at running back?
Yes, and particularly on FanDuel, Jahmyr Gibbs is only 5,800, and he actually got more work and looked better than I thought he would last week in the opening game. Like I was thinking people are kind of high on this guy, but he's a rookie. They're not going to like throw him to the fire because they've got David Montgomery there, and they do. But he got a little bit more work than I was expecting, and I would expect his work to actually go up, as the season progresses. My whole thing with rookies is people are incredibly high on them in week 1 when they're less likely to see work, and then and they're in timeshares and they have it looks like, and then like the interest goes down and down and down until about mid-season, or right around mid-season, the coaches are all right. Now this guy's been here for a couple of months. We can start like building up his workload, and then at the point where the interest is 0, then they actually start getting better and better games. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs is maybe somebody you want to be early on, because it looks like they might be getting him more involved than I thought early on. And I like David Montgomery as well, actually, but both more as FanDuel plays than DraftKings.
Yeah, it is funny. That is really funny, though, that you say it's so true about like the rookies. Is we come into the season and you're like, oh my God, Jahmyr Gibbs is a top 10 pick. He's so explosive, right? He's going to fill the DeAndre Swift role, blah, 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 blah. And then like, yeah, he's going to get eased in a little bit. So then we start becoming less and less and less interested in the player, but his role is actually going the opposite direction. It's like, we should be less interested in week 1 and continue to get every single week thereafter, continue to get more interested, but it usually happens the other way. And not always, but it usually kind of happens the other way. I also do just want to point out, the Seattle defense was an abomination last week. That I'm not projecting them to be that bad all season. They have some talent over there, but oh baby, against a terrible Rams offensive line, no Cooper Kupp. Like, I know Puka and everything looked good. Stafford was balling last week, so shout out to him. But man, that was a tough look. I think Detroit's going to hang a pretty big number here today. Seattle's also having some offensive line issues of their own, so it could be a little bit of a one-sided affair for the Lions. Any other running backs? And then we'll hit some of you guys questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think that's it. Maybe Derrick Henry. I like Derrick Henry as a play if you're playing that the Chargers game. Like, he's maybe some leverage off of Josh Kelly, if that makes sense. And so you kind of mentioned it, but the idea of maybe playing the Chargers passing game and pairing it with Derrick Henry, like, that's something that makes sense. Like, because we know Derrick Henry is a guy that can actually like break off those 40-yard touchdown runs, 50-yard touchdown runs. If he does that, then the Chargers are going to have to pass the ball. And like, we're high on Eckler in part because last year the Chargers receivers were hurt, And when the Chargers receivers were hurt, well, suddenly Austin Eckler's getting a lot more work. Well, now that Austin Eckler's hurt, does it make sense that like Josh Kelly's going to be getting a lot more work? Does it make sense that like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are going to be the beneficiaries? So like doing some kind of Chargers passing game stack with Derrick Henry, I think makes some sense.
I totally agree. I mean, I can't think of, you remove Austin Eckler, you're facing a pass funnel defense with Justin Herbert, and the wide receivers are healthy. Right now, they may not, again, kind of like the James Conner thing. I don't know if the Chargers are going to be healthy all year. Shoot, Eckler's already hurt, but they're, Keenan and Mike Williams are healthy right now. The other thing about, not to keep beating, Josh Kelly to death, because I do think he's probably going to have a reasonable game. I have him in some season-long leagues, and I'm starting him today. But the reason, like, it's easy to fall into the trap of X player is out, next man up is like a slam dunk. And it's a little more true in the NBA, right? Point guard is out, right? John Morant is out. Tyus Jones isn't going to do what John Morant does, but you're going to get a really outsized projection on the backup point guard or whatever. In football, sometimes the running backs are like that for sure, right? Like if we removed Rachaad White and we just gave it to somebody else, he would probably project really well. But like sometimes the player is the reason why that right? Austin Eckler is why all that running back production happens with the Chargers in terms of the passing game stuff and all that. Like you can't just take it, right? You can't just take Christian McCaffrey out. Eli Mitchell would be good, but he's not going to do the things that Christian McCaffrey can do, right? I like Tyjae Spears. Backup, you see Derrick Henry. Tyjae Spears can't do what Derrick Henry. You're not just replacing Derrick Henry with the next man up thing. And so I think it's just important to sometimes take that into account as well. Like Austin Eckler caught, how many balls did he catch last year? I'm just trying
over 100.
107 passes Austin Eckler caught last year. Like we can't just, hand that over to Josh Kelly. So I really like the Chargers side of things there. Let's hit some questions and then we'll start with some game stacks and just kind of see where the conversation goes with any of the other questions. Let's see the Henry ownership on DraftKings. I should have pulled this up when I pivoted over to FanDuel. Got in trouble from the chat a couple times last week. Too much DraftKings, so we're sharing the FanDuel screen here for everybody. Well, yeah, exactly. Should probably shout out the sponsor. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what Derrick Henry's ownership is on DraftKings, but his ownership is not high. Here we go. 7.4% on DraftKings and 6% on FanDuel, which. Look, I'm not really a big Derrick Henry guy, but that feels pretty good to me. That feels like a pretty good play, in particular when you like combine it with some of the other stuff you mentioned with maybe the Chargers passing game or just Keenan Allen or Mike Williams or something go really well with Derrick Henry. If you're stacking the Chargers, the Detox asks Laporta and Burks or Chig Okonkwo and Zay Flowers. If you have that Charger stack, which side do you prefer?
I'd probably go with Chig Okonkwo and Zay Flowers. Just like,
me too.
Like, I think we're both pretty high on Zay Flowers, and he might be a guy that we're not getting at this price for very long.
That's my opinion. I also don't think we probably won't get Chig necessarily. I would project Chig to have it now. Ryan Tannehill, I'm going to talk about bad. I can't dunk on AJ Dillon and Rachaad White and all these guys without bringing up how bad Ryan Tannehill was last week. That's probably my biggest concern with all of the Titans, because I think that game looks pretty awesome. Now, DeAndre Hopkins is playing. That would have made the conversation really different for today if we had Burks at 4,500 on DraftKings and Chig at 3,300 without DeAndre Hopkins, but he is going to play. I also just think the tight end thing, like Chig had a great role. I know he didn't do anything, 0 fantasy points, but his role was awesome. He was running the routes. He should have had a walk-in touchdown. Ryan Tannehill missed him on a play. So, I like to think about like, what if that would have happened? What if Chig had 10 points last week? How differently will we be viewing it? Because that would have been like the tight end 3 on the whole week or something like that. We might be thinking about it differently. And of course, Zay, like you said, I think Zay's the number, Andrews is back, but I think Zay's the number 1 wide receiver in that group. And oh boy, he looked really explosive.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I'm a little bit down on Mark Andrews this week. I don't know, like he's playing, like how healthy is he? And like that, the connection between Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. Like I was watching a lot of that Baltimore game. Like Lamar Jackson seems to be passing more and looking Zay Flowers away. a lot. So we'll see how that evolves as the season progresses.
I was excited about him. We talked about him last week, actually, as a fun tournament play, a way to kind of build just a smidge different, right? Don't play Marvin Mims, pay $1,000 more for Zay Flowers type of a thing, which worked out obviously quite well. But even I did not expect a 40% target share or whatever. Like, I mean, that him and Puka were like the most dominant. We joke about the rookies, sometimes taking time to get, these two are rookies in week 1 having 40% target shares. It was honestly crazy. It was a little fluky. Just the actual like raw target share, because A, of course Andrews was out, but B, it was like he caught like 4 screens. They threw him like a bunch of quick screens, and so that's a little part of it. But also, I mean, that's a good thing. Like, that's a point every time you get that. That's a really good thing if we're getting manufactured touches from him.
Yeah, and like designed looks, right? Like they want to get him involved. Like multiple times every drive. Like they are like this is a Zay Flowers play, right? Like they're looking to get him involved. So he was a 4,000 last week on DraftKings, 5,000 this week. It might be 6,000 next week.
Yeah, 100. I totally agree. We'll get to that game as well here during the course of the show. This will be a reasonable lead into some game stack conversations. Big Hurt Flowers, FanDuel single entry. What's your favorite stack? Favorite quarterback stack?
Yeah, so like it's something that maybe we want to point out is that we like try to touch on everything. Like I think the Las Vegas and Buffalo game, the Bills Raiders, like I think that stands out above everything else. And I think especially with the FanDuel pricing, like when I look at like DraftKings, it's easier to start getting to different game stacks. On FanDuel, it's like harder for me, like looking at projections and like running stuff to get away from that. Josh Allen. I mean, I think it's like Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Devontae Adams. Like Adams in particular, like there's a difference in like the salary structure. So he's like the 5th most expensive wide receiver on DraftKings, but on FanDuel it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8th, 9th most expensive wide receiver. Like that's a good deal, on a player that can score touchdowns. So it's not going to be creative. Like I'd love to give you like some kind of like off the board stack, and I can give you off the board stacks. Right. But the one that like sticks out is Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Devontae Adams for single entry.
Yep. I totally agree. And like you said, glad we have FanDuel up here so it's easier for the people to see. Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams are cheaper on FanDuel than they are on Draft. It's not substantially so. Maybe Diggs is the same price, or might be 100, whatever. Devontae Adams is $100 cheaper on FanDuel, as you mentioned. Like barely cracking the top 10 in wide receiver pricing. And that would be maybe crazy in and of itself. But we removed Jacoby Myers from the Raiders, which, if you didn't watch week 1 or you didn't look at week 1, it's Jacoby Myers. He's a fine football player, but no big deal. Jacoby Myers was also one of the most dominant target share players in all of week 1. They basically didn't play 3 wide receiver sets too much. Lots. It was very strange. There were 18 snaps. They ran 59 offensive plays, something like that. I think 59. 18 of them, they played 6 offensive linemen. I really haven't seen anything like this before. Bunch of 2 tight end stuff, bunch of 6 offensive line stuff. Hunter Renfrow barely played, did not register a target. Everything was Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Josh Jacobs. That was it. Now we took Jacoby Myers out. It's like, where the hell else are they going to throw the ball to? Hunter Renfrow isn't quite the same style of player that Jacoby Myers is. The matchup is not amazing for Devontae Adams, but like, dude, he's going to get, assuming that they don't just go 3 and out every time. And even then he might get 2 targets every time they go 3 and out. Like, he projects for the most targets on the slate, and it's like not close.
Yeah. And I don't think the Bills defense is necessarily something you're going to want to pick on, right? But like, if you're thinking about a game stack, you're aiming for first, or you're maybe going to come in last, right? And so like you want a game environment that's gonna shoot out and do well. And like Devontae Adams is actually a guy he had like I think multiple games last year of 17 targets, right, without Jacoby Myers, and now he's back without Jacoby Myers. Like they are not afraid to different quarterback, but a similar style quarterback.
Same coach.
Like they're not afraid to get him the ball, right? Like they're not afraid to just keep looking at Devontae Adams. And like maybe it's a game where the Bills do get up pretty big, on the back of some Stephon Diggs touchdowns, right? Or some Josh Allen touchdowns. And Devontae Adams is then just getting like 12 receptions on 17 targets or something, and maybe he doesn't find the end zone, but he's like racking up tons of yardage. And like as the 8th most expensive wide receiver, like that's all you need, on the slate on FanDuel. So.
Yep, 100%. And on DraftKings, this dude can put up 30 without scoring a touchdown.
Yeah.
Like which is there's not that, especially, we don't have Justin Jefferson, right, on this slate. We don't have some of the supers, obviously Cooper Kupp. No Tyreek Hill. We don't have some of the really, really high-powered wide receivers. We'll get to Jamar Chase and such. Not that many people can do what Devontae Adams can do. So he's pretty good chalk to me. What I will say is, of course, we all like Stephon Diggs, and Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stacks are great. Diggs also monster target share last week against the Jets and put up a good score against a really, really tough defense. I do kind of like some of the other Bills. I think you have Gabe Davis tagged here in lineup HQ. I tagged Josh Jacobs. So if you're not playing Devontae Adams, I don't want to say you have to play one of them because, they could get shut out or something. Their offense is a little bit lackluster, but it feels almost like, man, I am sort of starting teams with, am I playing one of Devontae or Josh Jacobs? Because it's really going to be hard for one of them to not have a good game. And if you're not playing them, I mean, maybe you do sprinkle some Hunter Renfrow, right? Something like that. It's really, really tough for me to avoid those guys. But Josh Jacobs, as you see here on FanDuel, where he looks pretty strong to me on FanDuel. Obviously, he projects basically the same as Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs for same price or cheaper, but he's 11%. And these guys are almost 30. I know there's dynamics of positions, of course, but like that's pretty appealing to me. James Cook, I prefer on DraftKings because he's a really dynamic pass catcher. Did catch 4 balls last week, I think it was. But same thing on DraftKings. I like him quite a bit, actually. And then I really like Gabe, and I really like Dalton Kincaid as well. We did see the Bills. Also, this game is so bizarre between these two offenses. One team was playing 6 offensive linemen, half the snaps, and the other team was playing 2 tight ends as their main offensive set. But that put Dalton Kincaid out there the whole game, basically. And he rarely lined up as a traditional tight end. It was like 3 snaps he was in line or something. That was Dawson Knox. He was a slot receiver and outside wide receiver. And I think this matchup in particular, of course, it's better. The Raiders defense stinks and the Jets defense is awesome. But the Raiders play kind of a very conservative style defense. And so if they can if Josh Allen can, hold his water a little bit, stop slinging it downfield and throwing interceptions, I think it could lead to actually a pretty good game for Dalton Kincaid here. And Gabe Davis is Gabe Davis. He's he can score 40, right? He's probably going to score 6, but he can score 40, and he's really cheap and low owned in the best game of the week. So anything else on this one?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I think you can game stack this game so many different ways, and like just kind of be aware of your the total ownership in your lineup, or like people use like ownership product or whatever.
Product,
or, just take a look at your lineup, and like if you're using the more common like Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams stack, then maybe you're going with a more off the board defense, right? If you're going with Gabe Davis, he's going to be much lower owned. Like maybe you're okay playing Cowboys defense, a chalkier defense, because you don't need to get away. You're already a little bit different with the Gabe Davis, or like Dalton Kincaid, I think is probably not going to be as highly owned as he should be. Like, like he's going to catch them, probably going to come on as the season progresses.
I totally agree. You're not playing Jimmy G, are you? We're sticking.
No,
if we're playing,
really.
Okay.
Probably like the 150 lineup set, but like not in like primary builds.
That's the same thing as where you said last weekend. If I just would have stuck with my first team, every single team after got worse. That's once you land on the Jimmy G lineup, it's time to stop making lineups. I think.
Yeah, and also like I think Devontae Adams is going to get so much of the work that like there's no like just play Devontae Adams. Or Josh Jacobs. Like maybe it is a Josh Jacobs game instead of a Devontae Adams game. Like I don't think you need to get to Garoppolo.
Yep, you're just getting everything from him through Devontae Adams, and other quarterbacks are going to outscore Jimmy G. So just play him. We are starting to get some of the news. Aaron Jones is officially out. CJ Stroud also kind of a shocker overnight, little questionable tag. He is going to play with the shoulder. We might talk about the Texans a little bit. I was a little higher on them earlier in the week because the Colts pass defense is totally putrid, but the Texans are missing 4 out of 5 offensive line starters, which is generally not good. And then Matt Smith, this guy, yes, that is me. I did say CH was not expected to play, but he is active with an illness. So definitely throw some cold water on Pacheco for me. And of course, Jerick McKinnon probably just goes into Millie Maker territory with those guys or something. They went from, I think, really strong pivots off of the AJ Dillons of the world to I'm not playing them. John might sprinkle them into his Jimmy Garoppolo lineups or something. And that will be that. But yes, he is in. Let's answer a couple more questions. Best value running backs for cash on FanDuel. I'm going to, of course, pull up and use our projections and sort by point per dollar. Pretty interesting. Jahmyr Gibbs, even though it's FanDuel, is still the best point per dollar projection here and is sub 10% owned. So I don't know that I would be playing Jahmyr Gibbs in cash, but I'm not sure what the optimal that spits out here is. But how are you viewing kind of the value running backs from a floor cash game perspective?
Yeah, I think Jahmyr. I
just play him.
Some Jahmyr Gibbs in cash, and as well as David Montgomery. Then Rachaad White. I think James Conner, and I think some Josh Kelly. But I mean that Kelly's 1,300 more on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, so it's not like a definite play. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is less expensive. We kind of know Gibbs' work role already, and we kind of expect it to go up as the season progresses. So, like both Rachaad White and Jahmyr Gibbs as like cheaper alternatives to Josh Kelly, and then James Conner as well. Yep.
No additional commentary from me. I am not playing cash on FanDuel today, so don't have to worry about that. This is a good segue into a couple other games to talk about. We just talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. Talked about the Lions a little bit, sprinkled in some Seattle talk. They were by far the most them and the Bengals. It was a race to the bottom of week one performances between the Bengals and the Seahawks. At least the Bengals have some excuses. They were in horrible weather and Joe Burrow hasn't practiced in a long time, essentially. Seattle lost some offensive linemen, but there's really no excuse for that second half performance. I think they had 13 yards in the second half, and 9 of them came on the last play, like in garbage time or whatever. They basically didn't move the ball in the entire second half. But generally, historically, the Lions games in Detroit, in the Dome, on the turf, have been really good, right? Almost like the Coors Field of NFL DFS. And this game in particular was definitely the Coors Field when they played last year and a couple of years ago. Things have changed. Detroit's defense is a little bit better. But how are you feeling about Seattle, coming into today? Or, Amon-Ra, Laporta. The Lions look really appealing to me, but how are you handling Seattle off of a brutal week one?
Yeah, so this is a game. Obviously, I'm playing some Seattle and game stacks, but I like the Detroit side a lot more. And I think we had a question. So like Mike Williams or Tyler Lockett, and I like Mike Williams a bit more. Just because Seattle did add a third wide receiver in the draft, whose name I can't even come close to get.
Jackson Smith. Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yeah.
Yes. So they added a third wide receiver, but it's important to know. I think Mike Williams is in a better spot, and the Chargers are on the road, but they're favored. They actually have a higher implied point total than Seattle does, even though that game has a higher point total than the Chargers Tennessee game. So I'm not as high at all on Seattle as I am on Detroit, even in that game, which kind of makes sense. I mean, Detroit's favored, which is Detroit's priced better. I'm using a lot more Detroit pieces outside of that game stack than I am Seattle pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you can stack the game and just say the Seattle thing was a fluke. In week one, they bounced back because I am still high on this offense. I mean, I locked DK Metcalf last week. Let me tell you how awesome the feeling was of having all these Puka and DK Metcalf lineups in the first half. Puka's going nuts and DK Metcalf catches the touchdown. We're sitting here thinking I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be joining John at the live final. Everything is going to be great. And then it could not have possibly gone any worse the rest of that game. But I do think, pretty good bounce back spot, in terms of I would be I would be pretty stunned actually if DK Metcalf gets over 10%, a little bit similar to the James Conner thing. I think people are worried about Seattle. I'm worried about Seattle, both because they really got hurt on the offensive line. Both offensive tackles are hurt. And they have 3 wide receivers, like you said. We have 3 really, really good wide receivers. And so it's hard for me to imagine any of them really, really popping. But boss man Dan Bach says he kind of likes JSN today. I know Dan is a big college football guy as well, like I am. And I'm a very, very, very big believer in JSN's talent. I do think from a hand in the dirt take, which might be where Dan is coming from, Detroit's going to score, right? You mentioned how you really like the Detroit side. If they're going to score and Seattle's offensive line is an issue, they can't protect, right? The slot receiver who gets open quickly and gets open underneath seems like a much better option than DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett catching bombs, if they can't protect Geno. So I'm not playing him like in my main team or anything like that, but I don't think it's too bad to play a JSN. Let's see here. Sorry, trying to catch up on some of the comments. How about this one? Fresh off of a monster week 1 and confirmed still going to be splitting carries with Bijan Robinson. Are you sprinkling any Tyler Algier in today?
I think literally no. I'm not. I don't think I'm playing any. I think it's a play that could win you a million maker, right? Like if it goes that way, because he's gonna have extremely low ownership. So if he gets another 3 touchdowns or whatever, right? Then hey, you're getting a huge leg up. I think that kind of play is going to miss way more often than it hits. I mean, it's so tempting to try to find that that one guy that's going to have sub 2% ownership. I mean, the game's got a 40-point total, and I just think Algier's not priced that well, for what could be splitting carries, right? He's the guy that maybe we're surprised is getting more carries, than we expected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's still a running back in a timeshare in a very low point total game.
Yep. That's nothing else to add. Totally agree. I'd be excited about him. If you drafted him in best ball, wheels up, feel really good about that. But 7,100 on FanDuel, that's a steep price to pay for a guy who is, a 50-50 time split on the team that I know they're going to run and they're going to run well, but man, they're going to run some of the fewest plays per game in the NFL. And I know he caught some passes, but he's not Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler back there catching passes. So he's a good example of, to me, again, I'm not ever really focused on the big, huge milli makers or Sunday millions. I know other people are. It's a little more of how I'm playing. I'm trying to beat my opponents, not necessarily hit the nuts. Yeah. The Algiers mix in when dude, I just need some total chaos. I need this 0.1. He's literally 100% ownership, and I need him to score 3 touchdowns. It's just not. I would rather try to take advantage where my opponents fail, as opposed to hitting all these total scratch off lottery tickets.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's just a noteworthy, frustrating team for fantasy because they have all these highly drafted assets on offense, right? Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Derek Ritter, but they play so slow. They have a particular style that they want to win football games with, and it works more often than I would have thought, but it just kills fantasy production.
Yep, 100%. Let's go to another game here that I quite like in tournaments, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around, and that's the Bengals and the Ravens. We talked a little bit about Zay Flowers already. Of course, Mark Andrews is back and playing, and the Bengals are fresh off of, like I said, one of the worst performances I've ever seen. And the box score doesn't even do it justice, which is really crazy to say about when a team throws for 80 yards with the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. But it was bad. These were prayer yards, all the targets and everything. None of these were really particularly even close, but I'm obviously willing to write that off. We have a long track record of the Bengals being an awesome passing offense. And I think the Ravens are really exciting on offense this year. And the Bengals might be a little worse on defense. They've been pretty salty on defense for a while. They lost a little bit of talent. I think they could be a little bit susceptible. So that makes this game pretty appealing, I think. You have no J.K. Dobbins, so you have kind of a mess in the backfield with Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, but I think there's playable stuff there. Joe Mixon is pretty a nice price on both sides, relatively speaking, given his huge kind of like workhorse-ish role. And then T. Higgins is very, very cheap. Jamar Chase is one of the highest upside wide receivers players in all of fantasy. What are you doing with this one? Because there's a lot to like, but it's also kind of a tricky game.
It is. It's one of the biggest differences between FanDuel and DraftKings on the week, which maybe is going a little bit overlooked. But like Lamar Jackson is 7,600 on FanDuel. He's the sixth most expensive quarterback. He's like 7,700. So it's more expensive on DraftKings. Like just for reference, I think Josh Allen is 1,300 cheaper on DraftKings and on FanDuel. I think Joe Burrow is like 1,300 cheaper, or Justin Herbert is like is 8,200 on FanDuel, like only 7,000 on DraftKings. Like generally you're saving 1,000 on the top end quarterbacks on DraftKings versus FanDuel, but like not Lamar Jackson. It's like Lamar Jackson, I love to play on FanDuel, like playing Lamar Jackson, and you're actually like spending down a little bit, and then you're pairing with Jamar Chase, and then your pick of the Baltimore receiving core. I kind of prefer Zay Flowers with a theory that maybe like Mark Andrews isn't all the way back, or maybe Zay Flowers is just going to cut into Mark Andrews' production when healthy more than we expected. And so like on FanDuel, I love the play of playing like Lamar Jackson pairing him with Jamar Chase. On DraftKings, I'm much more inclined to play Joe Burrow and skip over to Lamar Jackson because he's more expensive over there. And then you compare Burrow with Jamar Chase, or like T. Higgins had one of those games that could be awful good last week, where it was awful last week, but like they have to make a point of getting him involved. Like Kadarius Toney is the other guy that maybe falls into that bucket of like,
yes.
that they're gonna like they want to have these guys kind of ready and have last week be a distant memory by next month. So maybe they're going to be getting these guys kind of designed looks. And like you said, I think like Cincinnati had a bad game, but there was like context to that game that we're going to forget about. That it was like kind of sloppy, rainy game. Like I didn't realize it was going to be raining that much.
It was a monsoon. I mean, it was a monsoon.
Yeah, and then and Joe Burrow was hurt leading up to the game. So like missing, like we don't think about it. We're like, oh, he's active. Like we think just 100%. Like, but maybe not. Right? Maybe that missed practice time was something they needed to catch up on.
I totally agree. I also find this one funny where 6,400 for T. Higgins on DraftKings is a real good price. I mean, 7K is totally fine, of course, for him on FanDuel. But man, 6,400, projecting for almost 16 points, like that's, if you recall, that's like not that different from a lot of the top end wide receivers, and the ownership is not out of hand. So I do really like T. Higgins. I really like all the pieces in this game. I think you can stack this one up. I think you can use these guys as one-offs on both sides of this team. Like, shoot, you want to play Justice Hill, right, in the Millie Maker over Josh Kelly? Dude, go for it. He scored 2 touchdowns last week. He's a pass catcher. There is no J.K. Dobbins now. There's a little more uncertainty in terms of the split with him and Gus Edwards and stuff. But I think that just almost everyone in this game is pretty appealing, which is what makes right. It's kind of like the Bills Raiders thing. It's like, I don't know, there's 5 Bills I want to play and 2 Raiders, and over here there's like 5 Bengals I want to play and 2 or 3 Ravens, and so they're going to be core pieces of tournaments, I think, today.
Yeah, like I'll say, I think if there's one game I want to stack, it's Buffalo and Raiders. If I'm going to a second, I think it's Baltimore and Cincinnati.
I totally agree. All right, we do have to bring up maybe my favorite game, my favorite offense, not my favorite game, but I'm going back to the well with the 49ers. I won't ramble on about it, but we saw lots in the first. We just talked about the Bengals were putrid. Seattle was putrid. Even the Chiefs underperformed, et cetera, et cetera. I am like so bullish on this 49ers offense. Always was. But I think the NFL is in like this kind of sort of weird transitional period where some of the teams are struggling a little bit with figuring out these like defenses that are making everybody dink and dunk and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's what the 49ers want to do. They don't want to throw the ball down the field, right? Go look at the Dolphins. Tua ain't throwing 70-yard bombs. He's throwing crossing routes to wide open Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Well, he comes from Kyle Shanahan's tree, and that's what they do. Debo, Ayuk, CMC, Kittle. And I firmly believe despite last week's performance, this Rams defense is not good. It's Aaron Donald and a bunch of vagabonds out there. I think they got a little lucky because Seattle's offensive line got dinged up. And I think the 49ers are going to hang a monster number on the Rams today. 40 plus points, 30 plus. They scored 30 every week. So 40 isn't that different. I feel a little bit like them as I do kind of with like Raiders, Bills and stuff, where if I don't have a 49er in my lineup, it feels like almost a little uncomfortable, especially when you account for pricing. We're looking at FanDuel here. It's a little bit better pricing over here. But on DraftKings, Deebo Samuel's 5,600. Brandon Ayuk's 5,800. We have some value if you want to get Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle's 5,300. There's just a lot to like. If you want to play one of the Rams, I think you can play Puka or Tutu or something. I'm not forcing it though. That's one of those where I don't think you have to force a bring back just to have a bring back. You can play other guys on, like if you want to play Bills players alongside 49ers over Puka, it's totally fine. It's a brutal matchup for the Rams, but I love the 49ers. In particular, love Deebo Samuel today.
Yeah, and actually I put it in my stacks article this week, and I think I invented this, that Brock Purdy has like Kirk Cousins syndrome, where everybody loves the other pieces, right? Like we want to play like Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel. Like you see these guys like George Kittle, all with about 10% ownership or more. And Brock Purdy's got like 4% ownership. Like,
yeah,
who do you think's getting them the ball? I think like that's me. Yeah, 5% ownership. Like I think that's one of my favorite large field plays, or like 20 entry plays is like if you're doing 20 entries, like make sure you have 2 or 3 like Brock Purdy paired with multiple 49ers pieces.
Yep.
Maybe the Rams are better than we think. And Matthew Stafford is going to be like throwing the ball to Puka and Tutu, and they're going to keep this game competitive, and it could be higher scoring than we expect. But maybe maybe San Francisco wins this one like 42-7 too, and in that case, like, yeah, you could be playing either of those cases. You can be playing Brock Purdy and like pairing him like pretty affordably with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, or Christian McCaffrey, and you're getting some expensive pieces from other games in that lineup as well. I think San Francisco is going to be one of the most overlooked teams consistently this year, because they could be like, people are going to look at the games and think like, oh, it's going to blow out or what, but we don't know. Like, and they may be putting up a lot of points every single week with Brock Purdy at like 4 or 5% ownership.
I totally agree. I'm just going to tell everyone right now, when you see my main teams, they're going to have Brock Purdy. They're going to have Brock Purdy and they're going to have Deebo Samuel. I haven't figured everything else out yet, but it's my favorite way to play this slate because, like you said, you can stack up multiple other games around the 49ers. You could single stack Purdy, you could double stack Purdy, and you can still get Bills and Raiders. You can still get Chiefs and Jaguars. You could still get Titans and Chargers. You can get access to everything you want. And oh, by the way, you're stacking the offense that probably is going to score the most points. That's like, a top 5 offense in the NFL, and probably, what's going to score top 5 on this slate in total raw points. And it's really condensed. They only got 4 guys. They don't throw it to anybody. Nobody else touches the ball besides Deebo, Ayuk, Kittle, and CMC. It's almost like one of them is going to have a good game. I never go so far as to say one of them's guaranteed to have a tournament winning game, because that's just not how it works. But it's like almost a lock that one of them is going, if not 2, are going to have very, very good games. Like Brandon Ayuk broke the slate last week, and Deebo still scored like 12 PPR points, and CMC scored like 30. Like that, that's a ho-hum game for them because it's so consolidated and they're so good.
Yeah, it's like one of the best indicators of like overall offense on any given week is the implied point total. And like we're going to like Buffalo, they've got a 28 implied point total, like Detroit, 26 implied point total. Like Kansas City, 27, but like San Francisco is like 26.25, like that they're right up there. And people aren't going to go there just because like I don't know why. Maybe East Coast bias, like people like don't envision this offense. And maybe it is like, oh, it's just tough to choose between like Deebo and Christian McCaffrey and Ayuk, but like you've got to make choices. And I think like going to those guys at maybe a little bit lower ownership is something that can be good for your tournament lineup.
I think people generally just want to have a little more confidence in which guy it's going to be. You know, like Diggs is the man for the Bills, right? Travis Kelce is the man for the Chiefs. Calvin Ridley's probably the man for the Jags now. And then like at running back, right? It's like you want to know, like when you remove Austin Eckler, like you're like, okay, you know, Josh Kelly isn't going to, you know, screw me over here. He may not score the most points, but I feel good about his role and all that kind of stuff. With the 49ers, he said, I don't know. I don't actually know which one it's going to be, right? But I know it's going to be somebody. And so I would rather lean into that than the opposite, than just be like, I don't care to pick, so I'm going to ignore it. You know, it's like, I would rather pick because the payoff is massive. And quite frankly, the floor is not that bad. Like I said, Debo still scored double-digit points last week, and he didn't do shit. Brandon Ayuk and CMC did everything. And, Debo was still like, you could cash your tournament teams if you had Debo Samuel last week. You're not winning them, but you know what I mean. So anyway, enough about the 49ers. That's who I'm riding with today.
Yeah, I mean, and Debo's only 5,600. Like that, that's a really good price tag on DraftKings.
Talent per dollar on Debo Samuel has to be the craziest on this whole slate. There's some underpriced guys, of course, but I think from a pure football talent per dollar on DraftKings, Debo Samuel is probably the best one.
We're paying like 7,500 for him last year. So.
Yes, exactly. And on FanDuel, we'll go to the Devontae Adams. It's like Devontae Adams at 7,500. He's like he could be the best wide receiver in the NFL. He's certainly right up there with the Justin Jeffersons and Tyreeks of the world. And we're paying for him like a borderline top 10 wide receiver. So let's hit some more questions here, and then we can get some, little tight end talk, little defense talk, and some general tournament discussion. I don't really want to get so deep into the Cowboys with Kevontae Turpin, but Brandon Cooks is not going to play today. I do think it will be Jalen Tolbert that steps up into that wide receiver 3, whatever you want to call it, with the Cowboys. That matchup's just really, really, really brutal. I don't know that we need to reach that deep into the bag against the Jets. But I guess I'm not going to write somebody off for tossing a 3K guy into a million maker or something. But that game is more so about the defenses.
Exactly.
For me, on both sides. FanDuel single entry question. Pierce or Collins? I assume Nico Collins and Alec Pierce. I'm thinking I was Damian Pierce.
Probably Damian.
Oh, FanDuel, they're probably the same. I was thinking DraftKings, and they're a little bit different price. So yeah, Damian Pierce or Nico Collins in the flex. Obviously, both Texans here.
Yeah, I'd go Damian Pierce because I just think that scoring is better. Until I start seeing Nico Collins get into the end zone, like I'm going to go with the running back there. I think he didn't get Damian Pierce didn't get as much of the work as I thought he would last week, but I think I'm willing to write that off as like a one-off, and assume he's going to go back to like the usage he saw last season. So I think I'd heavily go with Damian Pierce in the flat spot there.
I agree. I do like Nico Collins a bit, but it's a lot more about the Colts pass defense than it is about Nico Collins. And then when you factor in FanDuel, you factor in the Texans are missing. I'm not even kidding, right? And I'm not trying to continue to bring up the offensive line stuff, but I think it's actually a lot of the times one of the more overlooked factors in, like, people will focus on it for defenses. They'll be like, oh, this offensive line against this pass rush, so I'm going to play this defense. It's actually really, really, like, offensive line play is like one of the most important offensive line play and quarterback play, like, drive offenses. And the Texans are missing 4 offensive linemen. So I think, CJ Stroud is banged up and they have no offensive line. They're playing the Colts, who stink. I could see them just loading up Damian. Like, this is Damian Pierce week. You got to lead us to the promised land and play some defense, because I think their defense is okay. They played pretty well against the Ravens. So I kind of sneakily like Damian Pierce here today, especially on FanDuel.
I like pairing him with the Texans defense as well. Like, if you're doing a tournament lineup, this is Anthony Richardson's first road game. That's like, you can pair Damian Pierce with, and like, Texans defense is one of the cheaper ones I think on FanDuel that I'm pretty high on. So yeah, absolutely pair Damian Pierce with the Texans defense.
Yeah, we'll talk about defenses in a minute once we get through these questions. I think they're a good one. I think the Colts are going to be a team we want to play defenses against a lot of the year, despite what we think about Anthony Richardson. He can be a play. and also we can want to play the defense against him. You know what I mean? Like, it's like Jameis Winston. It's like kind of like Jameis Winston. Like, we used to be like, I really like the Bucs, as plays in DFS, but also Jameis is going to throw a pick. We know Jameis is going to throw a pick 6. I also think the Texans' defense looked pretty good last week against the Ravens. We were kind of writing it off as like, the Ravens just struggled in week 1. I think the Texans defense might be a little bit underrated here. So I like that. I like that Dameon Pierce Texans call. Yeah. One thing Eric says, didn't Collins have like 10 targets? They did throw it 45 times. They were losing most of the game against the Ravens. I would not expect 45 pass attempts today from the Texans. Behind that line, CJ Stroud banged up. But I tagged Nico Collins earlier in the week here because I do like him. But things have changed a little bit. I don't think he's bad. I just prefer the Pierce Texans one that John brought up.
Yeah, I'd be more inclined to have the targets sway me on DraftKings rather than FanDuel.
Yep, totally agree. I do think to the Jalen Tolbert point and like Kevontae Turpin and stuff, I would not play John Mechie. Tank Dell, though, Noah Brown is out for the Texans. It was all Robert Woods, and God, there were so many Robert Woods targets. Made me feel like it was like 2008 all over again. But I think Tank Dell is a good football player, and there's not a lot of 3K guys available on this slate. Actually, both slot receivers in this game, Tank Dell and Josh Downs, I think are in the mix on DraftKings specifically.
Yeah, actually, so I do my Friday show with JM to win from 1 week season. Like, he's one of the sharpest football minds out there, and we do a hot take, like one hot take, and out of everything on the slate, his hot take was that Noah Brown's not getting his starting job back. Like, Tank Dell is gonna take this and run with it. So you might want to be buying in now.
Yep, I like it. I think he's might be their most talented wide receiver all around, not even just against Noah Brown. So yeah, similar to we're talking about Zay Flowers at 5K, may never be 5K again. I don't think Tank Dell is ever going to be 3,200 again on DraftKings, and he's not popular this week. So
he's one of like 2 or 3 players that I made an emphasis to just manually up their projection because it may not be getting captured like it should.
Yep, I actually think, I know I just hyped up the Texans defense in terms of a game stack that's like, you want to get funky and really cheap, but dude, you want McCaffrey and Kelsey and Devontae and all these guys around a cheap game stack. You can stack that Tank Dell, Anthony Richardson, Josh Downs or something. I'm just making something up. And then you still got wide receiver spot, flex, tight end. You have all the money in the world, and you just kind of flip the build around, right? Everybody else is playing Josh Allen, Diggs with Josh Kelly and AJ Dillon. You can go get CMC and Saquon and Kelsey and these cheap wide receivers. Actually like that one quite a bit. If I wasn't so locked into the 49ers, I would consider it a little bit more. But yeah, not much love today for cheap. Tyler says for a cheap wide receiver, bring back like last week with Reed. There's not much love because there's not as many. Like last week we had like 30 guys who were $3,000. There's not very many this week. Were there any other punts though? Either site that stuck out to you other than like Tank Dell and Josh Downs that we just discussed?
Yeah, we should hit on Jaden Reed. Like I do like that. I think Jordan Love is better than people think. Like people always want to go with the rookie quarterback. Well, what about the guy that's just been around for a year or two and is now stepping into a starting role and it was drafted highly, right? Like it was highly thought of coming out of college. So I like Jordan Love a little bit. That's a very large field tournament. I think Jaden Reed you can put in there even for, single entry 3,400 on DraftKings as a wide receiver. I think that's a good play. Maybe someone like Josh Reynolds as well is down there in price, and he's a good play on DraftKings. If you're looking at the 3,500 and under wide receivers, a little bit more slim pickings on FanDuel just when it comes to the cheaper wide receivers. Yeah, I think we've probably the same guys as DraftKings. I just don't like them as much because the pricing doesn't go down as low. I think Hunter Renfrow, yeah, he's kind of fits in there. I've just got him as a notch below Tank Dell and Jaden Reed, and even Josh Reynolds.
Yeah,
but I think if you're playing Buffalo stack, then
I get it with Hunter Renfrow. I can't. He easily could win somebody a lot of money today for sure. They're going to give up a bunch of points. They're going to be chasing. I just wouldn't be so confident that he's even the next man up. I know that seems crazy because you'd be like, oh, you removed Jacoby Myers. Hunter. They played mostly just 2 wide receiver sets. Hunter Renfrow does not play out. The reason why he didn't play hardly at all last week is because he's a slot only wide receiver. He doesn't play outside. They played Christian Wilkerson, and I'm forgetting the other name. But anyway, they played 2 other guys at least as many snaps as Hunter Renfrow. He wasn't even necessarily the next man up after Jacoby Myers got hurt. So the Bills might make that different, right? If the Bills hang 20, if it's 21-0, I think we'll see a lot more 3 wide sets and Hunter Renfrow out there. But I just wouldn't be too overconfident in exactly what happens beyond Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. Feel confident in that one, but the rest I think is a little murky.
Yeah, and they have like Austin Hooper too. So they might be going to the tight ends like a little bit more than we.
Michael Mayer, they can play both of those guys. Yep.
Yeah, I was higher on Hunter Renfrow like last year and the year before in similar situations, like not as high on him this year.
Yep. I totally agree. Detox asks, any thoughts on Zach Moss? Haven't heard that much talk about him across the industry. Well, that's probably because he's Zach Moss, but again, he's similar to a lot of the guys we mentioned here today, where like if you wanted to toss tournament teams with this guy in there and pray for 2 touchdowns, I think that he's cheap. I get it. Right. Evan Hull's out. No Jonathan Taylor. Deion Jackson was an abomination. He was the running back version of Kadarius Toney. He did nothing. And when he touched the ball, he dropped it. So I get it. I mean, I do get the thesis. It's Zach Moss. He's probably not going to catch any passes. And
yeah, and like there's a few things there. Like he kind of suffers from like Gus Edwards syndrome or Jake, like where he's got a big time running quarterback. It looks like. Khalil Herbert's in maybe, right? Like he's competing for touches with Anthony Richardson, and they're on the road in a game, as an underdog in a game with a sub 40-point total. So it's like I think for a larger field, you don't know, like maybe he does it, maybe he's getting in there for 2 touchdowns. Like Anthony Richardson doesn't look like he's going to be, passing a lot to the running backs, and he's going to pull it down and run it himself rather than try to do that. So it may not be as an appealing target, even though Zach Moss is like probably stepping into a starting role.
Right. It's like not all starting roles are created equal, right? Like we kind of threw cold water on Josh Kelly, but the Josh Kelly role is better than the Zach Moss role for fantasy. Yeah. Let's just be
in terms
clear
of like game environment. Yeah. In terms of like targets, everything.
Everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. That's most of the questions. I do want to hit. I apologize. Somebody brought it up earlier, but we did get kind of an interesting news snippet. You mentioned Khalil Herbert just recently, but Donta Foreman is inactive. I believe that was official. They were reporting it all like this morning. I'm just double checking. Chase Claypool is active, which was another thing that it was possible. Chase Claypool, my God, what a disaster. Chase Claypool they were considering making him a healthy scratch today, but Donta Foreman is a healthy scratch today. I don't want to get out over our skis with this because I believe it's Travis Homer is still there. He is kind of a nuisance, like he's not very good, but he's played in a passing down back role historically. He's mostly there for special teams, but does it give you any more interest in Khalil Herbert or Roshan, who actually stole a lot of the work, albeit in garbage time? But anything on these Bears guys, that's kind of some deep tournament cuts.
I'm not that high on them. Kind of similar like to Zach Moss, right? Where it's I don't know. I'd much rather play Justin Fields. Like if I'm going to that game, I'd probably prefer the Bucs side. And like if I'm going to play the Bears, I think it's going to be like maybe Justin Fields, like paired with Rashad White or Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or something like that. Just because I don't, I don't know. I'm always aiming to play less of the running backs that are paired with good rushing quarterbacks. That makes sense.
Who also don't throw it to them, right? Yeah. It's like he's not going to catch passes or many. I know Roshan caught a few last week, but that was because they were down by 30. Theoretically, they're not going to be down by 30 today. Fields would rather run. Same thing with Anthony Richardson, right? If something breaks down, Aaron Rodgers, bad example. One of those quarterbacks, the Tom Brady's, the Justin Herberts, will check it down to the running back, right? Why did Austin Eckler catch 107 passes? Because Herbert would rather just be like, all right, nothing's there. Let's swing it out to this guy. Fields, Richardson, Lamar, those guys run in
Run the
those
ball,
instances.
Pull it down and run it, and like you're saving
And
time.
it works.
And
It works.
Like, which isn't say like they're not going to, that they're guaranteed to catch 0 passes. It's just less likely, and I don't think that gets factored into price and ownership. I mean,
and the
once
ceiling,
a season, like you're going to have your Khalil Herbert or Gus Edwards or any Zach Moss, like multiple touchdown game, and a lot of NFL players, you're like could get a 40-yard touchdown, and then suddenly, wow, that play wasn't so bad. But I just think it's like less likely. Like it's more likely Justin Fields is getting the 40-yard touchdown than Khalil Herbert.
Yep, 100%. And you have such a thin path. You know what I mean? I would love to have as many paths as possible to a tournament winning performance. And when you don't have, the 5, 6, 7, 8 catch game even in your bag, it's really, really hard. Like you said, you need 2 touchdowns. You need a miracle long touchdown run, which, spoiler alert, Zach Moss ain't doing that. I think I could go race Zach Moss right now, and it wouldn't be I wouldn't be that much slower. So it's just like those guys are tough. It's just right. Like we talked about, I really like James Cook going back to the Bills. Like you want to leverage off of the Bills stuff. Like, guess what? James Cook can rip the long run. He's going to catch passes. He's explosive in this really explosive offense. I'm not counting on, please, you get to the goal line twice. The Colts will get to the goal line twice today. You got to pray that Anthony Richardson hands it off to Zach Moss and he gets in both times. It's like, man, that's I would rather try to win a different way. Let's hit defense real quick before we start to get ready to hand it off. Any defenses that particularly stick out? I guess we should start with the old Dallas Cowboys facing the fighting Zach Wilsons, but anybody else jumping out to you?
I always like to be a little bit lower on the really popular defenses. It not so much like last week. I knew the Commanders was going to be so high owned, and there just wasn't much justification for it. It's just a little bit of a similar situation, a little bit like more muted with Dallas this week. But like the Jets know they're starting Zach Wilson. Like they know that. They know who their starting quarterback is, and they know they have Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall. And so they're going to be changing things up pretty dramatically. This is going to be a defensive game. This is 2 of the best defenses in the NFL. I'm not as high on Dallas. Just like defensive scoring is so variant. Like an excellent defense can have an excellent football game and score very few fantasy points for their defense. So yes, Dallas is like the best defense in the best position for winning an NFL game. Like there's a very good chance they're not going to put up the most fantasy points at the defensive position, and they're the most expensive defense. Like you need them to do that. So some team with a terrible defense, we're not really thinking like if the Rams could, run back 2 touchdowns, on punt returns, like they are the defense you had to have, and they're only 3,100 compared to 45 for Dallas. So I like getting different at defense. Like if I have to pick 2 defenses, it's probably like Dallas just is the highest projected, and Houston. I like Anthony Richardson, but first road game might not be the best spot for him. So those are in terms of cash game defenses, I think those are the defenses that I'm more likely to go to, especially Houston on FanDuel. And other defenses like maybe Tampa Bay. I think home defenses get underrated a little bit. Like there's a pretty significant edge for them. But overall, it's just a very unpredictable position. And in tournaments, I'd be especially inclined to just get away from high ownership defenses.
Definitely. I think it's been this way. It's this way most of the slates. It was this way last week, even despite it seemed like can't fade Washington. They're a lock or whatever. They weren't the highest scoring defense. They had a fine game, of course, but actually the Cardinals on the other side, hilarious enough, were much higher scoring, almost doubled them up. But we do have to start to wind down here. I want to call out a couple other quick defenses. Sorry, I'm just reading through some chat. Mention the Texans. That somebody in the chat, I think Eric, shout out, great name, likes the Bucks. I think is totally reasonable. We just talked about Justin Fields and not wanting to check it down. Well, if he's not going to check it down, he's going to try to run. That's sacks. That's strip sack fumbles that can lead to touchdowns. He's very turnover prone. So I do like the Bucks. I like the Lions. We talked about some concern for Seattle. Generally, when you're missing both your offensive tackles and your O-line stunk already, it's not very good. And the Lions defense has gotten a lot better. They got after Patrick Mahomes. I think Aiden Hutchinson is probably one of the best bets for a sack today in the entire NFL. I think the Lions are a pretty sneaky one. I'm trying to see. I had one other one. Oh, and the Jets. We talked Cowboys, but like the Jets are like just as good of a defense as the Cowboys are. Of course, the matchup is worse with the Cowboys offense versus the Zach Wilson offense, but like there's the whole national narrative that Dak Prescott throws too many interceptions. Like, it's a stupid ESPN narrative, but like he turns it over. They'll turn the ball over. Mike McCarthy is calling the plays now, not Kellen Moore. Like it could get bad when the Jets are just that good on defense. Look what they did to Josh Allen last week. So I like the Jets quite a bit. I would rather play the Jets, especially ownership included, over the Cowboys in terms
of price. I mean, they're cheap.
And price. Mm-hmm. All right, we're bringing in the smart folks here as we get ready to sign off. How's everybody doing? Luch, are you got any? What I need from you guys. Got any free winners in the betting space? Because I need to cover the DFS potential losses when I fade Josh Allen. He throws 4 touchdowns to Stephon Diggs.
You and me both, man. I mean, that's the thing. You got to jump on these prop lines early in the week because that's crazy. There's such serious, crazy movement in the prop market. And I kind of played the Keenan Allen game earlier this week. I know you're a Zay Flowers guy, so I don't have to talk you into him. But when I saw him at 38.5 on like Wednesday morning, I'm thinking, what? I mean, just atrocious. So hopefully it scores and odds. You're checking us out. I mean, we all put good stuff out there. Everyone listening early in the week. I mean, we just have tons of picks. I think Britt Devine's put out enough picks to probably start his own portfolio on the site. We need his own tab. So shout out to Britt. But Squirrel, Erik, you guys, awesome stuff. And I love these takes. And I'm glad I'm not on the Jets defense island today. I was glad to hear that today.
Absolutely. John, you got anything before we get out of here and leave it to these guys to lead the people to the promised land?
No. Ready? Ready for crunch time.
All right, guys. We will catch you guys next week. I'll be listening. So give us some winners, and don't do what I'm doing with some of the wild fades in tournaments. But have fun. Have a good slate. See you guys next week.
Awesome stuff as always. You gotta love it. And also a big shout out to producer Steve. And they got the Food for Thought crew on Crunch Time today. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. So not only do I have Will Preach there, I also have Keith Eyster, frequent guest of Food for Thought. So this is going to be a ton of fun today. I'll throw it over to you first, Mr. Chief. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much, man. I had a tumultuous week, so I'm back ready to kind of get grinding here. And watch out. The takes are probably going to be a little spicy today. So let's have a ball. It's just week 2. Give me a little grace. It's gonna be way more spicy first couple of weeks because I want to get aggressive with the unknowns, and so I'm pretty excited for this one.
Speaking of hot takes, Keith, I know you're from Illinois, Midwest. Deontay Foreman was a healthy scratch today. Should I be excited about Mr. Johnson today, or is that more of a season-long outlook, or who knows?
I think you could take some shots today. He's really cheap. He caught a lot of balls out of the backfield last week, and now Deontay Foreman had quite a bit of work in week 1. So I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I'm looking for some cheap running backs to kind of get away from the Joshua Kelly stuff. So he is a guy that's definitely entered my mind here this morning.
Yeah, I'm landing on some players I didn't think I would about 3 or 4 days ago. We've had some injury news, and I'm sure if you were tuned into the block of shows beforehand, Aaron Jones and Christian Watson, 2 of the bigger names on the same team. That kind of puts AJ Dillon and Jaden Reed in conversations. I saw Jaden Reed was popping in some RG optos as recent as yesterday. I don't know if I'm going that route, but it's definitely interesting. Listen, we have a wild slate here, so please hit that like button. Throw your comments in the Discord. Throw some comments in the YouTube chat. We're going to look at the Discord first. We're going to go position by position, and of course, we're going to lead with FanDuel. And if you guys see any major differences between sites, feel free to bring up the DraftKings angle there as well, if you don't mind. Before that, if you're not already signed up on FanDuel Sportsbook and you're in a legal sports betting state, you should get on that. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed and $100 off the NFL Sunday ticket from YouTube TV. when you bet $5 on any week 2 game. I had to do a double take there because I wish I was a new user, because that's a pretty crazy deal. We know NFL Sunday Ticket is not cheap anymore. So if you're not on FanDuel Sportsbook, definitely check it out. Some really good promos, and we're about 40 minutes away from week 2. So let's go. Let's dive into it so we have time for some questions. I know we got a decent sized show here, but the three of us like to talk, as you can hear me just ramble here. Quarterback, Chief, what's going on at that position today?
I'll start with my most weird takes first, okay, and then we'll dial it back. So one of the things that I like to do from week to week, especially after week 1, is just kind of see, okay, who got lit up week 1 that was like super random that maybe we didn't think about. And for whatever reason, the Chargers got lit up week 1. I know Tua had this amazing game out of nowhere, but I mean, he still threw for 455. Like, it doesn't matter how good or how bad you are. 455 is a lot of yards in my mind, right? Like, Tom Brady didn't throw for 455 a lot like this. So when I'm looking at that, and then I'm looking at this offense, and yes, I know Tennessee is not as explosive as the Dolphins, but I mean, you got Tannehill here, 6,400 on FanDuel, which I think is reasonable. I do think DeAndre Hopkins being in this offense is going to help. You've got Treylon Burks at 5,400. I know we're just talking about quarterback, but right off the top, I want to go back to the team that just got lit up for 455 and make them prove to me that they're not awful. And I know they've got some big names in this secondary, but 455 is 455, no matter how you slice it. If we get 300 out of Tannehill, heck, if we get 280 out of Tannehill and 2 touchdowns, I'm feeling good at the end of the day. So right out of the gate, I think we've heard a whole lot of Josh Allen talk and stuff like that, but I want to look at guys like this, like Tannehill, Jared Goff against the Seahawks, who the Seahawks got demolished as well through the year by, if you listen to Food for Thought this week, by a Rams team that wasn't supposed to win any games with a bunch of no-name receivers. So for me, Tannehill, Jared Goff, right out of the gate, I want to get those guys in some lineups because I want to make these defenses prove to me that they're comparable or that they're competent, And if they're not, I'll be sitting pretty at the end of the day if they continue to get lit up, especially if they get lit up again.
I didn't pay Chief to talk about Ryan Tannehill, by the way, y'all. And if he goes for 300, I might need a pulse check. In that regard, though, I do have Derrick Henry in one of my 2 builds. There's some significant injuries in that game. The Chargers are down a couple of linebackers, which is never good when you're against Derrick Henry. And I think they need to right the ship. And what a crazy week 1 game between the Saints and Tennessee. Some controversial calls and some horrid, worst 1% outcome quarterback play from Tannehill. That's like the bounce back spot of all bounce back spots. And I like that angle. Let's see who's for real and who's not for real. And speaking of bounce back spots, I mean, I'll throw it over to you, Keith, and then feel free to jump in, Chief. Justin Fields was atrocious, right? But we know what his upside is in week 1. And Lamar Jackson, they didn't look fantastic in the debut, but neither did Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. So 3 quarterbacks right there with killer upside that had extremely underwhelming week 1s. What are your thoughts on those couple of guys, Keith?
Yeah, of that group, the guy I am very much on is Joe Burrow. Gets his Baltimore defense, who's missing a couple of guys in the secondary. Jamar Chase disappointed last week. T. Higgins did not have a catch. I absolutely love this Bengals stack. So Joe Burrow is a guy I'm super heavy on. Don't love the spot as much for Fields or Lamar. So Burrow would be my guy of those 3.
Yeah, I like that call quite a bit. And of course, we have to address Josh Allen. So I'll throw it back over to you, Chief. I mean, obviously huge team total for Buffalo. The Raiders played tough, but is that more of a Denver was uninspiring with the new coaching, or is that more of a, wow, the Raiders, are maybe a little bit better than we expected? Or, what are your thoughts here? Obviously, Josh Allen, mega turnovers. We know the whole story from Monday Night Football. This Jets defense is a top 5 defense, though. I mean, you can take Aaron Rodgers out of the equation. It doesn't take anybody away on the other side of the ball. So I don't know. Obviously, Allen in an interesting spot here. Vegas thinks they're going to pour on the points here. So give me your Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen take, Chief.
I think Buffalo's going to score some points. I think Josh Allen will have some turnovers, and I also think as much as we like Josh Allen at 18%, looks like on FanDuel, like that's a pretty hefty number for a quarterback on a slate. Why not just play Jimmy Garoppolo, who's supposed to be behind? And I don't have anything against Josh Allen, but I think I like the other side of this game a little bit more. Now, I do like Stephon Diggs a great deal across both sites, but I think for me, I'm willing to fade Josh Allen today at 20%. Like that's really what it boils down to. Like almost 20% at quarterback is like 20% at defense. You just don't have to do it. Like you don't have to do that, and you can get all of your exposure on the other side of this game. Jimmy G at 1% ownership. Josh Jacobs, Devontae with now we've got, we've heard Jacoby Myers is going to be out. Maybe that helps Devontae have a little bit of increased market share, which we've got good ownership on him. But I think you get rid of Josh Allen and plug in Jimmy G here and still play the receivers. And I think that's different enough. Nothing against Josh Allen. Okay. I think he's a great play today, but once again, almost 20% at quarterback for me. I can't do it. I just can't.
Yeah, talk to me about that, Keith.
Yeah, it's a pretty high number. I'm still not willing to fade Josh Allen completely. I will end up slightly underweight on him, but just a tremendous spot against the Las Vegas defense. We don't expect to be very good. I like stacking him up with a couple of different guys when we get to the tight end position. Dalton Kincaid, a guy I'm on a ton today. It's hard for me to completely boot him out of the pool, like Chief might be doing, but an underweight stance I think is appropriate at these ownership levels. Real quick on Lamar Jackson, he is super cheap on FanDuel. So if you're looking for cash game quarterbacks on FanDuel there, Lamar Jackson needs to be in that conversation. Didn't want to just gloss over him and say not in play because he is really cheap on FanDuel.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anthony Richardson coming off a really nice, pro debut. D'Amico Ryans has that defense playing, pretty well. I think they're out. Houston's out both of their starting safeties, though, or at least they were banged up all week. I'll have to double check on that. So,
can we go back to Lamar Jackson real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Listen, so Keith, I just want to, I don't want to say let's just say piggyback. I want to piggyback this Lamar Jackson take because I don't think people understand how close Lamar and these other big quarterbacks can be when he hits his upside game. So it's not like we know he's not going to go out and score 30 fantasy points every game, but we're getting over a 1K discount on Lamar today from Allen, and Lamar's projected around, I think it was 5%. Anthony Richardson's projected for a little bit more, and you see, it's just from a tournament perspective, Lamar is like the ultimate tournament play today. Rough game last week on the road. I actually took Baltimore to win this game anyway, and we're getting him at 7,600. He's got comparable upside. I just wanted to kind of back Keith a little bit on this one. Listen, Lamar could easily run in 2 touchdowns here. J.K. Dobbins is not here. We've seen him with Gus Edwards and these other guys, but what if this is the Lamar 70 rushing yard, 2 runs in for 2, throws for 1. He throws for 220. He could very well be the highest scoring quarterback on this slate. I just wanted to kind of back Keith on this because I didn't want to gloss. Lamar's a really good tournament play, really good.
Yeah, you get the price discount on FanDuel. You could even argue that being just $200 cheaper on DK, just talking about that perspective, would put him in even more of a unique tournament spot as more people probably just settle for Josh Allen and figure out how to get $200, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I guess we'll move on to running back again. Drop your questions in the chat here, and this is where it gets fun. We
need to mention that Chiefs game. Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence obviously in play. Highest total of the week, so don't want to leave those 2 guys out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I also believe is it Patrick Mahomes' birthday today? Yeah, it is. Narrative Street City. Travis Kelce's back, and we saw more drop balls in that opening night game, and it was just atrocious. So, one could speculate that Kansas City could have snuck out of there with a win. How much does Travis Kelce matter, and what do you expect from Mahomes today, guys? Keith, you brought it up. I'll stick with you there.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce just is such a unique player and does things that not very many, if any, other tight ends can do. So I think that Patrick Mahomes goes right back to just being elite here in this spot. It should open up the field for the rest of the guys. I don't know exactly what to do with his wide receivers, but I definitely know I want to be overweight on both Mahomes and Kelce. Just that premium stack, it's hard to get to. You have to like manually force it in almost. So I just love that stack. The other side, I think, is going to be just as popular. Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, we saw pop off with a huge game in week one. We kind of expect him to be the alpha there. All three of his receivers in play. And then Evan Ingram, I think, a tight end that's not going to get much ownership as well. We know that Kansas, like the pace of this game should be incredible. I think Trevor Lawrence is talented enough to keep up with Patrick Mahomes, even with Travis Kelce back in there. So really like the chances of this game to shoot out. That's definitely why I want to talk about it a little bit.
I took Jacksonville to win this game for what it's worth.
Chief is spicy today.
Plus money, by the way.
This might be a segue into running back here. I have two hand builds today, and ETN's the guy I don't have in either one of them, and he's one I just don't feel good about it. Maybe by the end of the show I'll talk myself into it. I just feel like we're gonna get a home run out of him, and I have to wonder what kind of shape Chris Jones is actually in after doing nothing with the team for months. Like, okay, he signed. Is he going to play 95% of the snaps off the rip? I mean, of course,
I doubt
it. So, it's not like Detroit lit up Kansas City on the ground, but they had, enough success, and we know what the metrics are with Chris Jones off the field. So, I mean, that has to play some consideration into the Jaguars, ground game, and probably just how you viewed that game as a whole, Chief. I mean, there might not be a defensive player, a defensive lineman other than, Aaron Donald, arguably Jeffrey Simmons, that means more to their, front seven than Chris Jones does to the Chiefs. So curious to see how much he plays. And ETN's a guy who I think, might be lost in the shuffle here. I think he's a fantastic tournament play. Maybe I'll talk myself into figuring out how to make him work by the end of the show. But our guy Steve has the FanDuel ownership, and we're seeing Josh Kelly at the top, super cheap. Thrust it into an RB1 situation without Austin Eckler. Same deal.
It's one of the toughest run defenses in football, though. That's the issue I have with Kelly today. Like,
I think you'd be a Titans fan, like you came into the show blind, but I'm here for it. So, okay, start right there. Josh Kelly and then A.J. Dillon I want you to get into as well, Chief, because Aaron Jones is out, as is Christian Watson. And, you got Jones at a nice price against Atlanta today.
Yeah, Joshua Kelly's getting a fade for me. I can't do it. Like, I've seen, so there are a couple of defenses, man. Run defenses, you just don't do it. San Francisco, Tennessee, and back in the day, and maybe even right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You just don't throw these running backs out there. It doesn't matter how good you think they are or what kind of spot they're in. Yes, I understand. Conceptually, they could just throw the ball down the field. Somebody falls at the 1 yard line, and he falls in. I understand that concept. I'm not oblivious to that. But generally speaking, I don't see how Josh Kelly pops off for a huge game. I understand the price is really why we want to play him. But once again, I'm going to stick to the same mantra at 30%. And we've got A.J. Dillon at 17. I'll just bump up my A.J. Dillon exposure and just fade Kelly completely. I think they're comparable, in my opinion, in tournaments. So for me, Kelly's just getting the X button against this tough run defense. And really, you probably should just be getting your exposure in the passing game with Herbert and Williams and all these guys anyway, because that's how they're going to have to score points. So I'm out on Joshua Kelly.
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I am on board with this fade. Just the cheap running back in tournaments is generally a very good fade. Chief made some great points about this Tennessee run defense. The way to beat Tennessee is through the air, and they have the weapons to do that with Justin Herbert and company. So I am with this fade. I will be significantly underweight Josh Kelly. I have a rule in place to not play more than one of Kelly or Dillon in any lineup.
I love that, Keith.
I'll probably be underweight on both of these guys. But yeah, completely with Chief. I don't see a way. Kelly's probably going to have a decent game, but I don't think he's going to put up a score that you necessarily have to have in tournaments. So underweight on Kelly and Dillon. Looking to make pivots in that range. I really like Rachaad White with this matchup against the Chicago Bears. We saw them get absolutely torched last week by Aaron Jones. Rashad White is my favorite pivot down there. If I'm spending up, Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs are two of my favorites.
Yeah, those are interesting points, and it's kind of just like the only way to beat Tennessee is like by default going to the air with how they've been funneling the run since the beginning of last season. If Kelly dumps one or two in, then still let it beat me. That's fine. The Chargers ran the ball 40 times last week between both of them, and by all means go for it against Tennessee, but you're probably going to be on the wrong side of the result there. The Titans are also missing a couple guys in their secondary, and since we didn't really mention Justin Herbert, Tennessee yielded the most passing attempts per game to opponents last season because of their stout run defense. So you factor that in with no Austin Eckler, who's arguably the best player on your offense, skill position-wise. Maybe you see Herbert throw 45, 50 times. This game played last year, and just talking Josh Kelly, this game played last year. Tennessee was in a body bag, as usual. Broke the record for most bodies used in a season. And it was only a 20-17 game. Herbert threw for 300 yards, but I guess the Titans' red zone defense held up. That being said, we're gonna have a fun receiver conversation. But I'm with you on Josh Kelly.
Let me plug this one stat in because I know we're getting a little bit close.
Yep.
And this is from last week's results, but you're gonna hear the same names because this is how it's been in the league probably for the past 2 or 3 seasons. Number one run defense only gave up 41 yards last week, Tampa Bay and San Francisco. So Philly only gave up 52 rushing yards, and that's between 2 games now. Denver gave up 61, Jacksonville gave up 65, Tennessee gave up 69. These teams, generally the past 3 seasons, are the ones that aren't giving up rushing yards to anybody. So I just want to plug that in just to strengthen our Josh Kelly case. I don't see it.
Yeah, and there's so many options. You mentioned White in that 55 range. AJ Dillon's 5,900, and I think the thing is about Dillon is, and he was terrible last week. Averaged like 2 yards, less than 2 yards a carry. But Aaron Jones ran routes on 50% of the team's dropbacks. So like, if Dillon's not running routes, it's going to be Taylor from the practice squad, and I just can't see him playing a ton. Like, Dillon's going to have to run routes, or they're going to completely change whatever the plan they've been putting in place all summer. So I think that's interesting. Joe Mixon's an interesting piece. As he just like no one ever wants to use him, and he's kind of sandwiched in the price range. It's a game that has a healthy total. We talked about kind of liking both bounce back sides, and I think Mixon's interesting. And how about James Cook? Obviously, Buffalo. As a piece of Buffalo that maybe not a lot of people are talking about, but he saw 6 targets last week. So I think he's interesting. There's a lot of options here. I saw Creighton tag Isaiah Pacheco, and, that's interesting, finally on his way back a little bit here. So speaking of Tennessee, how about Derrick Henry? I mentioned him a little bit. The Chargers are down some linebackers. Like, you're going to get back to your bread and butter here. That's how they're going to move the ball, if they're going to move the ball. And, we saw a little bit of success from Raheem Mostert and company last week. Got any thoughts on the big dog, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers have historically been fine allowing rushing yards. Like that's been the way to beat this defense. I think Henry is fine. I'm struggling to get as much as I want because I'm high on McCaffrey. I like Saquon Barkley a good bit, and I think the Travis Etienne stuff is super interesting as well. So I've got a lot of exposure to this top range, and Henry's falling behind those other guys for me, but it's a pretty good spot for him here.
One other guy I want your opinion on, Keith or Chief, before we get going, is James Conner, right? I mean, you don't really want to play a ton of Cardinals, but he ran the 5th most routes out of the backfield, which typically isn't, what James Conner does, but he was heavily involved in the pass game. They talked about him being the bell cow at running back pretty much, all summer, and so far that remains true. Matchup with the Giants, the spread is under a touchdown here. Maybe it'll be competitive. Any James Conner thoughts here? Obviously, it doesn't feel great, hitting the buttons with the Arizona Cardinals, but I'm debating him and Aaron and AJ Dillon in that little zone right now.
Go ahead. You got any counter thoughts, Chief?
Not really. Not really. I mean, I like AJ Dillon quite a bit, so I'm just going to basically bump up my exposure to him this week because I think he's kind of going to get off here, personally.
Yeah, I'm not super interested in Connor. It's just really tough to get excited about this Arizona offense.
Yeah.
The Giants got absolutely embarrassed by Dallas. I really feel like the Giants are coming to play. Not to say that Connor can get game scripted out, because Lucci mentioned his role. It's an elite role for sure. He could catch several balls out of the backfield, even if they're getting beat up in this game. So I don't mind the price tag, just not a guy that I'm on a ton today either.
Okay. We'll move on to wide receiver, about 12:39 Eastern here. Get some questions in, and we will get to them. You got some studs at the top, Diggs with Allen and Jamar Chase in that game environment, and it seems like you guys are anticipating a bounce back. St. Brown was great in the opener, gets a Seattle defense now, and Devontae Adams could be a popular run back with Buffalo stacks. So wide receiver, what's catching your attention today, Chief, and where are you looking?
So I'm going back to my spicy plays. I am going to start with this Tennessee offense. I think Tannehill and Hopkins and Burks, I think there's some opportunity there. Even Chigo Okonkwo. I know we didn't really see this team light it up last week, but once again, I want the Chargers to prove to me that they're going to get rolling here. I like the Raiders passing attack with Devontae. I think Austin Hooper. We're not a tight end, but I think Devontae. And then if you're playing Jimmy, then you just got to cycle through these receivers, because I don't know who the other guy is going to be today. Quite frankly, what we know is Devontae is absolutely the number one this week, right? With Myers out, Renfro, Carter, Wilkerson, I don't know who the next guy is going to be. So I'm just cycling through those guys with Jimmy, right? That's because I don't know. With Detroit, I think you got tons of options. But Amon-Ra, he's at the top. I think a sneaky spot for me in terms of overall is the Giants' pass defense. And while I understand that, I'm not probably as high on Daniel Jones as in terms of tournaments, a couple of these receivers are going to be much better than last week. Slayton is kind of a home run guy. Hodgins was a guy that picked up a lot of targets, and they're not expensive. Slayton's 5,600, Hodgins is 6,200. You got Waller there. One of these guys is going to catch a touchdown this week and probably have 5 catches for 50, 60 yards. It's probably Slayton, it's probably Hodgins, it's probably Campbell. You just cycle through those guys too. And I know that's well, Chief, why are you cycling through? Because in football, don't you hate it when you get the stack right and then you leave that one stupid receiver off that goes off and you're like, why didn't I just plug him in? So I think the Giants passing attack under Dable here, they got to get going this week after that embarrassing performance. And I know that's more emotion than statistics, but you can't tell me the Giants aren't ready to come out and score some points today. You just couldn't sell me on that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Keith, I'll throw it over to you too.
Yeah, top end is super strong here this week. Devontae without Jacoby Myers, good chance he earns 30 to 35% at least of the targets here in this spot. Up pace game with Buffalo, should have to throw. Expect them to be trailing, should be throwing a ton. Jamar Chase, I think this bounce back spot for Cincinnati is something I'm all over today. Calvin Ridley showed he was the alpha in Jacksonville in week 1. He's really cheap on DraftKings. FanDuel, he's priced up here with all of these elite studs, but on DraftKings, you get a little bit of a discount to Ridley. Amon-Ra St. Brown at home in the Dome. Absolutely love this spot for him. Diggs, obviously, in a great matchup with Las Vegas. Keenan Allen is a guy I want a ton of as well. Austin Eckler missing, and Austin Eckler is a guy who has a huge role out of the backfield. So could really see Keenan Allen's opportunities pick up today. And then DK Metcalf is the guy that's in this range that's just kind of getting left behind. He is also in that Dome game in Detroit. We saw this game just absolutely explode for over 90 points in last season. A little concern there about the Seahawks offensive line missing both of their tackles. So that could be a tough spot here for Seattle. I think even if they're getting beat up a little bit, DK Metcalf can still go off for a pretty big game here. So love the ownership number on DK. Working into the mid-range a little bit, Deebo Samuel is a guy I have circled here for sure. Love this spot for Deebo against a Rams defense we don't really expect to be that good, looked okay in week 1, but I'm not buying that. Kind of the same thing with the Lions. the
I'm
Lions,
not either.
the Lions and Rams both looked okay, but
yeah,
I'm not buying either of those defenses. Zay Flowers had an awesome role. Obviously, we get Mark Andrews returning this week, so we'll see what the role looks like with Mark Andrews, but still a little bit underpriced if he's going to have that same role. Mike Williams is another guy you can certainly play here. Love the upside. We mentioned wanting to attack Tennessee through the air.
Can I just say this too? Like, as we've come on this show, this actually wasn't my favorite game until we started getting our thoughts out in the air. I think this Tennessee Chargers game might be my favorite tournament stack the way it's starting to shake out, because you can run it multiple ways. You can run Henry and then Herbert in the passing game, and then you could also flip it and run Tannehill and his pass catchers on the other side. I didn't expect me to kind of land on that, but as we're talking, I'm going to start building a couple more of those to squeeze in before the break. This is starting to become a favorite one for me in tournaments.
We'll see. I mean, just in terms of opportunity, volume, and the strengths of both teams, like, we're all in agreement that the Chargers should be forced to throw the ball. That Tennessee front seven is intact. So just in terms of volume, without Austin Eckler, who saw well over 100 targets last year, the rookie Quentin Johnson wasn't really involved too much. It should be Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and, segueing into tight end shortly, Gerald Everett. We'll see. But wide receiver is really interesting. A note on that Raiders game. My best guess is I think Wilkerson is going to see the snaps ahead of Renfro. Myers played 76% of his snaps on the outside last week. And he's out of the fold. And I think Renfro ran all of his routes from the slots. 100% of his routes were from the slot. So if we're talking schematics and who can be plugged in, I think it's Wilkerson. If you're talking disgusting, dirty, I need to take a shower, large field millie darts, then maybe throw Wilkerson in a lineup or two for 3K as a run back. I'm not saying that's a great idea, but he should be on the field. And they liked him. If you played some preseason DFS or you're hanging out with us, maybe you started following him a little bit. The Raiders kind of like that guy. I just, I'm a little nervous about Renfro's role since Myers was pretty much on the outside, most of the time last week. So there's so much to talk about. If you have any more questions about wide receivers, please drop them in the chat so we can move on to tight end. And then we'll start taking some questions and talk about a couple of darts we can throw at defense. Travis Kelce's back. Where do we start here, Chief? Talk to me about Travis Kelce and some other tight ends.
Well, what I will say, I think from a non-DFS perspective, just him being back is going to help this offense because he's going to garner attention, and perhaps the receivers are even more wide open and they can focus and catch the ball from Patrick Mahomes. So from a DFS perspective, I mean, as long as he's full go, he's the number one option on this team, and he's priced like a number one receiver. He's $8,500. I think Keith said it perfectly. If you want to stack Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce today, you have to be very intentional because even the optimizers aren't going to force it in. So I think with that being said, this is a really high upside spot. What I will say, Keith, just to add in, if I'm stacking Mahomes and Kelce, what I'm probably going to do or would do rather is I would still run Sky Moore, MVS, Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice, like Mahomes, Kelce, and then one of those other two. Because if Mahomes goes off for 300, Kelce's probably somewhere between 80 and 120. Kelce's never been a guy to pop off for 200, but the other guys get all the catches and yards, and Kelce still gets all the touchdowns. So I just want to make sure I've got exposure to that. So Mahomes to Kelce, probably the premium upside stack of the day that's going to go very low owned because of the price.
Yeah, and Keith, Mark Andrews is also back from injury, so he's interesting. George Kittle still saw a fair share of targets in week one, didn't do anything with him. Okonkwo, we'll see what happens. Darren Waller, we talked about the Giants. He only ended up playing a little over 50% of the snaps. How much of that was because they were getting slaughtered and he was, a little banged up before? I don't know. But Darren Waller, to me, is intriguing from a tournament perspective today. Give me some tight end thoughts here, Keith.
Yeah, I love your Waller call there. This Arizona defense might be the worst in the NFL. They're just overall their roster is really bad. Mentioned the Giants and how bad they looked last week. Expect them to look much different here today against Arizona. So love the Waller call. Okonkwo is a cheap guy. I'm certainly interested there. Tannehill overthrew him he was wide open streaking down the sideline. I know he didn't have a catch last week, but it's not because he wasn't open. Tannehill just missed him a couple of times. Luke Musgrave had a really exciting role, I think, like this matchup here against Atlanta in the dome there for him. Higbee, I know the receivers got most of the attention last week with Nakua and Tutu Atwell, but Higbee we've seen go for huge games without Cooper Kupp before. So I've got a little bit of interest there. Evan Ingram is a guy I think is kind of getting lost here, and we love that game environment. Obviously, most people are trying to get to Kelsey, so I think Ingram instead of Kelsey is a fantastic way to differentiate your Jacksonville KC stacks. And then Sam Laporta, another talented rookie in a game environment that I love there in Detroit.
I just think it's this Buffalo game. Knox and Kincaid both ran routes on over 60% of their snaps last week. So both of them had a little time in the slot. They were out there. Things were not working out for Buffalo whatsoever. But I can see either one of them. I think they're both kind of unique ways. If you're looking for, if you're not feeling Gabe Davis, who's also interesting, maybe you plug in one of those tight ends and take a pivot off of Luke Musgrave, who I think might be coming in a little overowned. We'll see what happens after Locke. He's catching a lot of buzz and some steam here. Any defense thoughts before we take some questions? Of course, it's kind of throwing darts here, but go ahead, Chief.
Let me plug one more tight end and just kind of. I think Jake Ferguson's still really good, even against the Jets. He picked up, and I talked about this in week 1, where it's look, Dalton Schultz had a massive target share with this team, and he left and went to Houston. And Jake Ferguson, just look at what happened last week. He had a massive target share yet again, even with CD and Brandon Cooks playing. And I think Jake Ferguson could end up being somewhat heavily involved in the passing game again, if that can, give him some accurate pass catches. CD, Michael Gallup, one of these guys is going to get locked up. It's probably CD. This secondary is real for the Jets. And so being able to have possible mismatches for Jake Ferguson, I think he's got upside today. If we're expecting Dallas to score points, I don't think it's CD and Michael Gallup this week, even though I know Diggs kind of torched them. Diggs was the only one. All these guys aren't going to torch them. I really like Jake Ferguson here at the tight end position if he's going to pick up that much market share.
Anything else, Keith, or should we talk about some defenses real quick?
Just adding on to the Buffalo stuff, Kincaid is a guy I really like. Josh Allen got kind of quite a bit of flack for pushing the ball downfield a little bit too much last week. Ended up with a couple of interceptions. So I think he really looks to find that underneath guy today. So Dalton Kincaid over Gabe Davis for me today for sure.
What if he doubles down though and says, "Hold my beer"?
Yeah, he could.
The Bills put up 30+ points in 7 regular season games last year, and just for what it's worth, Gabe Davis scored in 4 of them. So their team total is 27 and change. If you think they really, just hang them out there and make a statement, then. I saw Squirrel like Gabe Davis, and of course he's inconsistent and solely a tournament play. But talk about a piece of that game that's sub 10% that could really boom. This should be his post hype year. Remember last year it was Gabe Davis, and it was every couple of weeks he had a ceiling game, but that was pretty much it. So let me pop over in the Discord. Got some questions over there. Let's see. I'm not sure if. Amateur Hour in Discord. Let me know if your questions weren't answered in the previous show. I really can't remember. Just feel free to tag me in the Discord. Favorite GPP loan stack with quarterbacks? Chief, I think I know what game you're looking at, so you don't have to reiterate yourself. But you got anything else you're looking at?
Those are kind of my main ones that are off the board. I still think that Jacksonville, Kansas City game. Believe it or not, Lawrence and Mahomes really aren't garnering a ton of ownership. So I still. I like them a great deal, but we all know it's this Chargers-Titans game for me is kind of my tournament du jour.
Low owned stack, Keith. What are you looking at?
I think my favorite one is Geno Smith to DK Metcalf. Everyone seems to be running away because of this Seahawks offensive line situation, which, don't get me wrong, it is scary. But since when are we afraid of the Detroit pass rush? So I'm still playing plenty of Geno Smith stacks, and DK would be my favorite stacking partner. Certainly can use Lockett or JSN there also.
I have a sneaky one that we kind of haven't talked about in terms of, and I think this is for both sides of the game. We got two young quarterbacks in Indy and Houston. Like this could be a sneaky little back and forth affair here. Richardson to some of his pass catchers, Stroud to some of his pass catchers. I was very shocked to see Robert Woods and Nico Collins, these guys, get as much market share as they did last week. It could be a sneaky little spot for Richardson, Pittman. On the other side, Collins or Woods.
I like that call.
Any fear or like, have you read anything about Kelsey pitch count stuff?
I haven't seen anything about him being limited. I mean, if he's still banged up, I don't think he's out there. The Chiefs shouldn't have any trouble making the playoffs. They're gearing up for a Super Bowl run. They wouldn't risk him.
Yeah, good point. Although they did lose last week, so just something to think about.
Even if he plays 70% of the snaps, though, he's still the most valuable weapon in that offense. Like, he's still going to get more market share than anybody else at 70% of the snaps, I think.
We're getting a ton of questions, so I'm going to keep it moving here. FanDuel Cash from Who Mike in the chat. Keith, would you rather have Josh Allen and Jahmyr Gibbs or Joe Burrow and either Josh Jacobs or AJ Dillon for FanDuel Cash?
I would try to get up to Allen for cash. Gibbs is a little bit risky. He is really cheap on FanDuel though, so I think he's fine. We expect him to get a little bit more work than he saw in week 1, but just know that you're running a little bit of risk there with the Gibbs role we saw in week 1.
All right, FanDuel single entry, Chief. Jacobs and Stephon Diggs or Saquon Barkley and Gabe Davis.
Jacobs and Diggs.
FanDuel Cash, Keith, back to you. Joe Mixon and the Cowboys defense or Ridley and the Texans defense?
I'm always going to prioritize the position player there, so give me Ridley and the Texans defense.
All right, let's see here. In the press conference this week, Dorsey said the Bills are removing design and run plays for Josh Allen. Are you concerned at all about that, Chief?
No, because I mean, he's still going to have. I think that helps him. Honestly, should help protect him and keep him healthy. He's still going to run. Like if they run everybody streaks down the field and everybody's got their back to, he's going to take off and run anyway. So I still think he has rushing upside.
All right. Cam Akers is a late not playing guy. He's deactivated allegedly. And shout out to our guy. So no Cam Akers today at the buzzer before the stock market closes.
Well, that game's not till 4. You got a little time. Well, 4 my time. You got a little bit of time, but just send Cam somewhere where he can play. Like they just keep doing this to Cam every year. Starts, plays 3 snaps, and the other guy takes off the.
So does that do anything for Kyron Williams for you guys? I know we're talking the Niners here though.
Not against the Niners, no, not for me.
I mean,
the role's going to be there. The matchup is not great, but he's got to be the guy now, right? I mean, he took over at the end of the game last week. Akers still had 20-something touches though, so there's a ton of opportunity there. I know it's a gross matchup, but
does that do anything indifferent about Puka? I mean, are you concerned about him? I mean, talking game script wise, he should see a bunch of targets again if he's a full go. Does that change anything for you with Puka?
Doesn't change anything for Puka for me.
Were you on him?
Here's the thing, though. So here's the thing. Like we're so high on Puka, like we forget Tutu Atwell has 6 catches for 118 yards last week. Like he's cheaper than Puka. Puka's getting about 10%. Tutu's getting about 2%. Give me Tutu. Nothing against Puka. I'm just saying, like they had equal opportunity, and they both produced.
Funny. Yeah, good point. Let's roll through this 12:58. Okay. Let's see. Puka or Mike Williams as a last receiver in high dollar DK tournaments, Keith? Puka or Mike Williams?
I mean, I'd like a little more lineup context. Straight up, it's probably Puka, but I like the Mike Williams play too.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sorry, I missed that one before there. Red Sox. Let's see. FanDuel Cash, Cowboys D and Puka, or Houston D and either Hopkins or Higgins, Chief.
Oh man, let's go with. Well, they're saying cash.
Yeah, so it's either Cowboys D and Puka or Houston.
Even in cash, I hate playing chalk defenses. I know that sounds crazy, but it's probably Puka Cowboys. But give me the other one. The Cowboys could easily just flop here.
I'm scrolling up through the spam in the YouTube, guys. So we're gonna go lightning round here. Excuse me if I missed you. Let's see. Favorite stacking partner with Anthony Richardson, Keith? Is it Pittman?
It's Pittman.
Okay. FanDuel cash question for you, Chief. Gibbs and Ridley, or Montgomery and Keenan Allen?
Give me Gibbs Ridley because I think Ridley's better than Allen today.
Keith, what's your concern level on Tank Bigsby maybe vulturing carries away from ETN today?
I mean, he's going to be there, but he didn't have much of a role in week 1. I think it's similar to this today.
Okay. Brad says Kelly at 15 to 20% is an easy fade. I'm with you, and it might even be higher in some tournaments. Damian Pierce, interesting FanDuel pivot, he says.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Okay. Yep. We didn't mention him. Chiefs on Damian Pierce. Chief, I'll stick with you. FanDuel scoring Jaden Reed or Marquise Brown. Those are drastically different type of players, but Jaden Reed's the cheaper one. You got a lean there?
Yeah, give me Reed because no Watson again. He's got to be involved.
Got one
and we're at lock. Oops.
Whoa. We're at lock, but it's we have some wiggle room here. Before
Reed and no Aaron Jones. So to me, that means the receivers they got to be involved a little bit more.
Yeah. So we're at lock, and we tried to power through as much of that as we could. There are some late games though.
Yeah.
So we can we can talk a little bit more about that Rams news if either of you had time to collect your thoughts. Obviously that Arizona game, we can stick around for a couple more minutes. Zach Ertz going to go off, says Groovy K. We didn't talk about Ertz. He had 10 targets, didn't do anything with them, but opportunity was there. You got any Zach Ertz thoughts, guys?
I don't mind it. Like when guys are getting big targets at the tight end position, you just play them.
Yeah, here I was a Trey McBride guy in July on Underdog, and so far no good for me. But Zach Ertz, Keith, did that do anything for you?
Doesn't do a ton for me. Just not sure what the upside is. Like there's no run after the catch there at all. I mean, if he catches a touchdown, you're good, but not one of my favorite this week.
Yeah, so that was a lot of moving parts today. Thank you guys for bearing with us, and apologize if we didn't get to your question specifically, but I think we powered through most of them. Favorite tight end for the late slate. There we go. There's a late slate question, and that kind of goes in hand with Zach Ertz, and we talked about Darren Waller. I
like Chiefs Jake Ferguson call too.
How about that? 7 targets. 7 targets. Yeah. Do we like Adam Troutman at all?
I prefer Jake Ferguson, or get to Waller if you can.
Okay. Cool. I guess we're gonna head out, but is there anything else we didn't mention, or any other hot takes you wanted to get off your chest, or anything like that, guys?
No hot takes. I'm on a lot of plus money teams this week, so if they come through, the sports betting bankroll is going to be very pleased.
Yep. So I pieced together a Chargers double stack with Henry. So I'm hoping that Henry keeps them competitive, and you got to watch price when you double stack. But I'm hoping the volume and just the schematics here of the Titans run D. Like I can't see the Chargers running the ball 40 times again, or 30, and maybe not even 25. And
I'm on the lookout for that tonight on a sidebar. I am on the Showdown show for that one. I'm not sure who's on with me tonight, but that's something sneaky tonight. I want to see if Miami is going to give up the rushing yards like they did, because if they do, that's going to be sneaky stuff for next week when people are continuing to be on the passing game. And looks like you might be able to run against them a little bit if we get another big rushing performance from Zeke and Stevenson this week.
All right. Keith, anything else before we head out of here?
I don't have anything else. Good luck.
Yeah, same to you, Keith.
Good luck,
same to you, Luch.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you, and thanks for sticking with us for the long haul. If you're with us since the sun rose today, shout out to producer Steve. So for my guys right here at RotoGrinders and everybody that was on the grind today this morning for us, I'm the Luch. Good luck, everybody, and we'll see you soon.